Transition. The Inspector Dalton Files Prequel. Written by Adair Hart. Narrated by Michael Wolfe. Chapter 1. Fighting 3 or 4 vampires was one thing. 9 was another. Inspector Dalton Kingston was helping Michael, an ancient vampire, deal with a rogue group of blooded vampires. Dalton initially arrived on Earth on January 9th, 2013, and it was only a month later that he found himself lending a hand to Michael. As the most evolved human on the planet, Dalton's purpose was to assist where needed. On his original Earth, vampires were a myth, embellished in stories and folklore. But they were real here. Many different types existed, each with their own strain of day-drolled exotic energy. Exotic energy was not a new concept for Dalton. A sliver of cosmic energy coursed through him, which gave him an advantage. He called it his Ever-Sense, named after the space and time-traveling cosmic being who rescued him from certain death and brought him to Earth. Dalton's enhanced senses illuminated an aura around people that told him if they possessed exotic energy, day-drolled or otherwise. It also gave him superior strength and speed relative to a human. But the more important aspect was it allowed him to be aware of his surroundings. He could sense someone's heartbeat, breathing, and general condition up to 50 feet away. When he focused, everything seemed to slow down. His senses showed that 3 blooded were down the hallway ahead of him and Michael, and 6 more on a lower level. Michael had planned to take this group down since they trafficked in humans, something that drew attention to the non-human world. These vampires did not seem to care about that, a mistake Dalton and Michael would correct. Although most blooded abided by non-human rules set forth by the Earth Ward, the unofficial ruling body on Earth, this group was different. Their whole body tattoos were a badge of honor, and they dressed in black and gold clothing. Their trademark emblem was the golden bandana that covered the bottom half of their faces. Michael had tracked them for a while, but with Dalton's help, they nailed down a location. Across the hallway entrance, Michael, in his black, heavy armor, crouched and peered out. Dalton liked him. With his thick Eastern European accent and massive size, he was a force to be reckoned with. He wielded a large black shield with a golden design on the front in his left hand and a stun baton in his right. Dalton suspected he was being tested, since Michael could have done this by himself. Thanks to some upgrades Dalton received before coming to call this Earth home, he had upgraded his nanotech suit. It currently operated in Scout Spectre mode, named after the space inspector position he held for 70 years, but it had other modes, such as camouflage and casual, that concealed his fair skin well. A dark blue mesh underarmor covered him from his toes to his neck and formed the first layer. Thin, armored silver pads resided on top of that in various sizes and shapes that segmented the suit. Some pads were larger, like the 2 on the chest or the ones that covered the quads, while others were smaller, like the ones on the abdomen or the knees. The pads could take a lot of punishment, but they did not fully cover the body, and he was vulnerable between them. His helmet had 3 distinct areas. The silver front plate contained a thin, glowing blue slit that covered his eyes and went down over his nose in a T pattern. Black pads protected the sides, and the top and back were a dark blue solid piece. He also carried 2 weapons. The first was his multi-purpose handle, or MH, holstered on his right thigh. The MH had a meshed grip over most of it, except near the end where it flattened out. It extended into various utilities, including lethal weapons, but he tried to avoid those situations. He often used it as a stun baton that stored 100 charges. A light stun consumed 1, medium 2, and heavy 3. The second weapon was his retractable stun gun, or RSG. When activated from his left inner forearm, it formed a blocky, wraparound structure on his right hand with a button on top for his thumb. When he balled his fist and tapped the button, the RSG fired a thin blue beam. The RSG had the same stun levels and usage as the MH. The RSG covered a lot of situations, but it only had 25 charges, so he used it sparingly and only when absolutely required. It also meant that if the RSG was active, the MH either needed to be in his left hand or holstered. It surprised him that he was allowed to keep it on this Earth, but as he had discovered, alien technology existed in various degrees, and stun weapons were common. His was even considered less powerful than the ones he had researched. Still, he relied on it for ranged situations. As a former Scout Spectre, he often visited places where he could not carry a variety of equipment, and the MH and RSG answered that. The MH also allowed him to connect to systems directly after scanning the port type, and he used it to form useful shapes, such as keys and connectors when necessary. "So, what's the plan?" asked Mikhail. Dalton nodded. "I'm going to rush the 3 in front of us." "They'll detect you before you reach them," said Mikhail, looking Dalton over. "What if they shoot at you?" Dalton activated his light blue, semi-transparent, rectangular nanoshield from his left forearm. It stood vertically about 3 feet, with scraper-like endings at the top and bottom. The angled corners made it resemble a widened barrel. "That's what this is for," he said. "All right," said Mikhail. "We got this," said Dalton. He pulled out his MH and formed his stun baton. Although he could hit the blooded from range, he might not get them all, and then it would end up being close range where his stun baton would be better. He charged down the hallway with his shield out and focused. His Everin sense made everything around him appear to slow. He relied on that and his speed to close the gap. The startled vampires focused on him. Dalton's ocular implants displayed data labels off to the side in his augmented reality interface, or ARI. It verified what he sensed. The blooded were weak. The closest one jumped back and growled. The other 2 raised their guns. Dalton slammed into the first vampire, sending it sprawling back into the second. In a continuous motion, he spun and hit the third one on the right with a medium stun. The blooded crumpled. The 2 others on the left stood and pulled out machetes. The first swung wildly. Dalton blocked the strike with his shield and raised his arm back. The shield's bottom scraper pulled the weapon away. Dalton jabbed his stun baton into the attacker's stomach. The vampire fell. The last one tried to slice Dalton's head off. He stepped out of range and used his baton to guide the machete past, then slid it up the blooded's arm and hit it in the head. The vampire collapsed. Mikhail rushed forward. "Damn, you're fast." "You didn't need my help." Dalton smiled. "Your help is always welcome." "Uh-huh." "There's 6 more coming up the nearby stairwell. We can use the top of the stairs as a choke point, so we only need to deal with 2 at a time." Mikhail tilted his head. "I sense them too, but not that specifically." He rifled through his backpack and tossed a handcuff to Dalton. "I wish I had your Everin sense." Dalton had debriefed with the ancient vampires when he first arrived on Earth, and his Everin sense had been discussed. To see it in action seemed to impress Mikhail. They handcuffed the vampires before hustling to the top of the stairwell. Mikhail motioned to the left. "Stay behind that corner, and let me be useful. I'll pull them out of the stairwell and into the open. You can grab them and do your fancy stuff. I'll smash 'em." Dalton laughed. "My fancy stuff? Bring 'em on." He enjoyed the heat of the moment. Although he tended to avoid action as a Scout Spectre, it was a good way to release energy. Mikhail lowered his massive shield in front of him and adopted a defensive stance. Dalton sensed the blooded rushing up. Their nervousness suggested they knew they faced something tough. They would know Mikhail as an ancient vampire, but Dalton would be unknown to them. Ancient vampires did not like blooded ones in general, and consider them a rival strain. Mikhail's shield held sturdy against a hail of bullets. Some projectiles ricocheted. "Stop shooting, damn it!" said one of the vampires. 2 rushed forward with machetes. Dalton grabbed the first one and threw it to the side. He stunned it, and the vampire stopped moving. Mikhail bashed the second one back before moving forward and hitting it in the head with his stun baton. The vampire crumpled. Mikhail raised his shield and backed up. 2 more blooded appeared. Dalton kicked the third one into the fourth. They sprawled off to the side. Dalton pointed at them. "Get them. I'll get the last 2. Mikhail yelled as he charged the 2 who struggled to stand. Dalton stepped out to the top of the stairwell and looked down at the startled vampires. He jumped down, slammed the fifth one into the wall, and sidekicked another away. As he moved back, the fifth vampire slid to the ground. A tap on the chest, and it stopped moving. The sixth one used the wall to stand and tried to grab her machete. Dalton charged over and jammed his stun baton into her stomach. She cried out and collapsed. He hustled up the stairs. Mikhail dodged machete strikes. He shield bashed the final vampire and hit it with his stun baton. Dalton holstered his MH and clapped. "You could have helped," said Mikhail. Dalton shrugged. "I didn't think a beefy, ancient vampire like yourself needed any." Mikhail slapped Dalton on the back. "You got jokes. I like it." "I've been known to crack a few every now and then," said Dalton, grinning. "All right, if you can cuff these, I'll go below and check out the area. I'm sensing something unusual down there, but nothing I can't handle." Mikhail nodded. "Sounds good. I'll get an Earthward support team in here to pick these assholes up." "If there are captives below, I'll send them up," said Dalton. Mikhail kicked one of the downed vampires. "Time to tie up some bitches." With the area secured, Dalton descended to the floor below. The dim lighting did no favors to the dirty hallway, but he sensed humans ahead. He was sure it smelled great, but he did not want to lower his helmet to test that. Moans and sighs filled the air. He peered into one room and saw 3 cages, each with a human inside. A woman rushed to the bars. "Help us, please." Dalton lowered his faceplate and gagged. The smell was worse than he expected. It was like someone had left rotting meat out for days. Still, he wanted to present a friendly face for her. "I'm here for you," he said. He emitted a gold beam from his right palm over the lock. The scans showed he could break it by vibrating his nanosuit around his hand, a technique he learned from traveling with Everin. Although it often used up more energy than it was worth, he had no problem using it now. The lock crumbled. She ran out and hugged him. Dalton sighed. She looked better off than the other 2, and he sensed others outside the room. He broke the locks off the other cages and tapped at the side of his helmet. "Mikhail, 3 humans are coming up," he said. "Got it," said Mikhail. "You see that other thing you sensed?" "Not yet." Dalton faced the woman and crooked his thumb at the door. "Get topside. There's a big beefy guy there who will assist you. Yes, he's a vampire, but not like these." The group hesitated, then rushed out. Dalton raised his faceplate and continued down the hallway. He saw an unconscious woman, nude from the waist down, in another room, hanging from chains. He had an idea of what happened in there. These blooded seemed to like to play with their victims. He freed her and laid her on the ground. Once he dealt with the unusual presence, he would get back to her. The next room had 4 cages with children inside. He released them and told them to go topside. One hugged him as she cried. A lump formed in his throat as he thought about his daughter. She would have been about the same age, and he wished he could see her again. The little girl hugging him tight did not want to leave his side, but after he explained he was there for the bad guys and there might be more, she nodded and took off. Dalton updated Mikhail about the situation. The final room was a kitchen of some type. A table in the middle had a human who appeared to have been carved on for days. Perhaps that was what he had smelled earlier. Dalton's senses told him the unusual presence was in the area. He was not sure how he missed it initially. A red light over a sink provided illumination to the rest of the room, and sinks, counters, and several metallic cabinets lined the walls. He sensed the blooded was in one of the cabinets and raised his right hand to emit a scanning beam that scoured the area. The scan verified the blooded's location. Dalton approached the cabinet with his stun baton out. The cabinet's door burst open. Dalton caught the older vampire by the neck. It hissed at him, baring its fangs. Dalton hit it in the groin with his baton. The vampire grunted and collapsed. Dalton laid it over his shoulder and looked around. This had been an interesting hunt with Mikhail, and Dalton wondered if they would all be like this. Compared to what he had fought before coming to this earth, the blooded were no match. Maybe if they had numbers and used better tactics, they might have stood a chance. He suspected they were not too bright in the first place to operate this brazenly. He only consumed 14 energy charges for his weapons and some from his main energy store for the hand vibration. A low-cost fight in that regard, for a high yield. Dalton stood on a metallic paneled platform that jutted out over the Appalachian Mountains. The platform was the outside part of Lord Noskov's base. He was a powerful, ancient vampire lord, and had invited Dalton to stay there while he adjusted to this earth. Lord Noskov was a close friend of Everin. Dalton had traveled with him to help with a problem, and after it was done, this was where he ended up. He appreciated that the Earth Ward took on cases like the one he did yesterday with Mikhail. The Earth Ward was a non-human council that represented Earth to the Kregan's Star Empire, the galactic superpower that controlled the region around Earth. Although they were made up of non-humans and, for the most part, determined what happened on Earth in secret, they had official recognition by the United Nations as a law enforcement agency. Due to his past as a scout specter, essentially a space inspector, and Everin's word, the Earth Ward gave him a similar rank. Everin formed the Earth Ward to watch over the planet, and Dalton would not let him down. Dalton looked out at the setting sun. Light rays moved like fingers brushing the tops of trees for one last touch before they disappeared. He loved the smell of the forest and, in general, being back on Earth that was not a radiated wasteland. His muscles relaxed. Light footsteps echoed behind Dalton. He glanced back at Jake Melkins, a man in his early 20s with fair skin, an athletic build, and a mop of dark hair. Like Dalton, Jake had been saved by Everin and lived at the base. Dalton was not sure this would be his permanent residence, but it was a good place to get accustomed to things. "Hey," said Jake. Dalton nodded. "Jake." Jake chuckled. "Mikhail can't stop talking about how tough and fast you are." He helped. "Yeah, but he said you didn't need him. That's high praise from him." "Trust me," said Jake, shaking his hand in front of him. "I'll accept it as such," said Dalton. Jake nodded as he studied him. "Wow, you're jacked." "In what way?" "I meant said Jake. He bent over and growled while flexing. Dalton laughed. "You look like you could jump right into a fight," said Jake. Dalton wore square-toed, shiny black boots and beige trousers with pockets. A black belt separated his pants from his loose, dark gray t-shirt, which showed off his athletic physique. "It's my nanosuit's default mode," he said. "It can change a lot, and I call this casual." "That's cool. Mikhail mentioned you had other modes, but I've only seen this one," said Jake. Dalton changed into another mode. "This is my camouflage mode." "Whoa! Now that's badass!" Dalton focused and switched back to his default mode. He now wore loose black pants that concealed most of his black boots. A black jacket with a dark gray seam up the middle covered the top, and a dark gray officer collar wrapped around the neck. A wide, shield-like patch with a silver outline resided on both upper arms. The right displayed the Earth Ward symbol with some text on it, while the left showed the Inspector symbol, which resembled an elegant magnifying glass surrounded by horizontal lines that went to the edge of the patch. Inspector Dalton Kingston sat on the upper right part of the chest in gold lettering. "The Earth Ward Inspector uniform," said Jake. Dalton smiled. "It sure is, and what I would wear out and about in an official capacity. The Earth Ward wanted to give me an outfit, but I could replicate it. Plus, I have a light kinetic shield in casual mode. Wish I had that." "Any other modes?" Dalton changed to a different mode. "This is my Scout Spectre mode. I only activate it when entering heavy combat, and it's also the only one that allows me to use my nanoshield." "Wow. That reminds me of what I would see when I lived on a space station," said Jake. "Mikhail said I looked like a futuristic ninja with metal pads." Jake laughed. Dalton changed back to his casual outfit in default mode. "I saw your MH on your thighs when in Scout Spectre mode, but where does it go on the others?" Dalton grinned. "In my default mode, it's strapped to my right thigh, and I can access it inside my pockets." "Awesome. And your stun gun, RSG, can form from your right hand. That's so cool. I also noticed your slicked hair doesn't move, kind of like Everin." Dalton ran a hand over his shaved sides. there isn't too much to move. True, said Jake. He furrowed his brow. On a serious note, I bet you're still getting used to things here. Huh? Dalton smiled. I am, actually. My Earth was nothing like this. Maybe at some point it was, but not when I left it, so I've heard. You traveled through several parallel timelines before this one, right? Dalton nodded. 10, to be exact. That's crazy. And the last one was this timeline where you ran into Everin? That was the 11th. Everin actually had a summons specifically for me, said Dalton. He recalled that Everin's ship, the Toravada, issued summons that Everin and his crew, known as the Gang, attended to. One of the summons had been to rescue Dalton. He understood now why the Toravada issued it. The Toravada chose him to come to Earth at this point in time and help out. It was also where he received some of his more unique gifts, such as his Everin sense and Toravada touch. Jake grinned. I saw that the Toravada chose you or something. I guess that's why you're here. It is, and I'm at peace with that, said Dalton, casting a sidelong glance at him. My Earth before it got nuked resembled this one, but was more advanced. After the war, it was a radiated wasteland with mutants and savage raiders. It's where I lost my family. That sucks, said Jake. Dalton nodded. It's okay. I know your history and that you've also dealt with losing family. Jake sighed as he looked down. Yeah. Dalton had been given access to the Toravada's knowledge base. One of the most intriguing aspects was when he discovered all of Everin's adventures since arriving on Earth a long while back. Jake was the first human Everin met. Dalton enjoyed watching their first interaction, as Everin recorded everything. Jake had been abducted at the age of 6 and lived on a space station until he was almost 21. He was supposed to become a breeder for the Ciselter Empire, but Everin changed all that. Jake's mom had also been abducted and ended up as the main course for a vicious alien race known as the Ogerians. Jake looked over at Dalton. I guess we both lost something before coming here. Dalton laid a hand on his shoulder. We did. But all we can do is look forward. It doesn't mean we need to forget the past, but we don't have to let it define us either. Jake chuckled. You sounded like Everin just now. He is a good influence. They shared a laugh. So, what's your plan then? Asked Jake. Dalton looked out. As you may or may not know, the timelines are still healing from the Mortani, rogue cosmic beings, and what they did. That means all dimensions to Earth, including other parallel timelines, can cross over much easier now. My purpose, at a high level, is to assist in providing stability. I could see that. The Helians were removed from power last year, and they ran Earth from the shadows for thousands of years. Now we got the Earth Ward running things, and although Everin created it, it's not been the smoothest transition. There's still a lot of issues, and I guess you'll handle the parallel timeline and dimensional ones. Dalton nodded. Most likely so. I'll be dealing with the hardest or most unusual cases. I suspect that not all will deal with dimensions or timelines. Jake grinned. You'll be among a select few who could handle those. The Earth Ward is backed up in investigating things, and you were a scout spectre. Some type of space detective, right? Inspector, but same concept. I got most of my gifts from the first parallel Earth I visited. That's where I became a scout spectre and eventually commanded 50 others over 10 systems. Jake's eyes widened. Wow. The cases here will be a little easier, I think. Perhaps. But I don't have a highly trained scout spectre corps to call upon. Also, this Earth's non-human population is powerful, as are various human factions. I might have an edge, but it doesn't mean the cases I investigate will be easy. Jake nodded. I got ya. Speaking of edges, you have the motherlode. Dalton shrugged. It depends on the situation. My nanotech suit in Scout Spectre mode can take some punishment, but only to a limit. A machine gun would hurt. My nanoshield is powerful, but it doesn't cover everything. In default mode, I have a light kinetic shield that would protect me against small arms fire. But as you already probably guessed, anything stronger will break it. My camouflage shielding works great, but anyone with enhanced senses or thermal imaging will see through it." "Those are still nice to have," said Jake. "I read you heal fast or something." "I have supercells. They can heal me from most poison or disease as well as wounds, but not if my head is missing or there's a hole in my chest. They came as part of the nanosuit package. Since my skin has been bonded to the suit, the supercells keep everything inside good." "Yeah, but that's still a much bigger advantage than a normal human. What other abilities do you have? I really wish I didn't miss your debriefing sessions, but Lord Noskov has kept me busy, and Mikhail seems to be keeping you busy on runs. I don't want you to feel like I'm interrogating you." Dalton nodded. "It's all right. I've only been here a month, and I'm not going anywhere. For my non-combat abilities, I have Everin's sense that allows me to detect things and some other enhancements. The Torvada touch lets me open and close dimensional portals, but with some limitations." "Those are cool names," said Jake. "Yeah, I like them." "You've already met Evot, my AI that controls my servbots. She's cool," said Jake, smiling. "I like that she can jump out of your upper arms into a cat or crow form." Dalton chuckled. "She's actually in crow form now, flying around." Jake looked out. "I know my abilities seem powerful, but each of them has a weakness as well. However, it's tactics that makes my abilities strong. Individually, they can be overcome, but it's much harder to do that when they're used efficiently. From my experience, the best approach is to avoid combat if possible. Words carry weight and are the preferred solution." Jake chuckled. "I get it." He boxed in the air. "Still helps to have your abilities, the MH, and your RSG?" Dalton laughed. "Yes, I suppose it does. You carry a stun weapon too. Pistol, I believe." "Yeah, it's a modified Sasselter blaster." While Dalton was confident in his abilities and understood them intimately, he also knew how overconfidence could be a liability. He had been in situations where he should have come out on top easily, but it came down to the wire when it should not have. There had been several harsh lessons in that regard, and he had lost some under his command. He would not take what he possessed for granted, and was thankful he had them. It was an advantage he would use to help others. "What do you think about the Wildhaven Institute so far?" asked Jake. Dalton ran a hand over the back of his neck. The Wildhaven Institute was where non-humans and aliens visited to learn about Earth and how to interact with humanity. "It's interesting for sure," he said. Jake smiled. "Yeah. Plus, you get to travel up there with Dr. Snowden, Emily, Dr. Bryson, and Karen." Dalton's eyes softened. Dr. Snowden and Emily were Everin's permanent travel companions, and Dalton had grown close to them. He was glad he got to continue seeing them between their trips. Dr. Bryson was a good friend of Dr. Snowden, and like Dalton, Dr. Bryson had been a temporary traveling companion. Dalton enjoyed comparing notes. Karen, Dr. Bryson's fiancée, seemed resentful that she had been pulled into a situation that required knowledge of the non-human world. Dalton suspected she wanted a simpler life. "This is true," he said. "I still miss training with Emily in the Hollow Room and having philosophical discussions with Dr. Snowden in the Planner Cartography Lab. I'm just glad I can still interact with them." "Yeah," said Jake. "Plus, Everin and V are around sometimes, so you'll still get to see them." Dalton fondly remembered V, Everin's trusty, mobile artificial intelligence. Dalton had come to view V as family, and, by extension, Everin and the others who traveled with him. "Definitely. I value every moment I breathe," he said. Jake nodded. "I'm with you on that." Robert, Jake's dad, called out to them, and they looked back. "Looks like Dad is making burgers again." "You in?" asked Jake. Dalton slapped Jake on the back. "I wouldn't dream of missing it. Let's go." Chapter 2. Dalton enjoyed the previous day. Not only did he get to help out on a mission, but he ended the day with some burgers, a few shots of bourbon, and relaxing with Jake and Robert on a cloudless night. When he imagined coming to this Earth, those were the type of things he envisioned. Robert was wise and sort of reminded Dalton of Dr. Snowden. Jake was fun to be around, and he brought energy wherever he was. Dalton had enjoyed hearing about Robert and Jake's involvement in dealing with a dimensional being known as an outsider that tried to take over Earth, but was thwarted by Everin and the non-human community. Dalton felt a kinship with them in that they had a shared bond through Everin. The day so far had been peaceful, and it was 1:00 p.m. Dalton had a good breakfast and even got a workout in with Mikhail and Jake. Mikhail sparred some with Dalton, but he was faster than Mikhail. Jake's jokes lightened the mood, but Dalton sensed something bothered Mikhail. Maybe when he was ready, he would tell Dalton. The base was much nicer than Dalton thought it would be. Although only one side jutted out over the mountainside, a massive complex rested inside the mountain. Lord Noskov had been a gracious host, and Dalton enjoyed meeting some of the people he had only heard about. They enjoyed hearing about Dalton's travels as well. Jake had sent a message to Dalton to come to the command center. He was not sure what was going on, but Jake mentioned it was important. Dalton had been relaxing in his living quarters when Jake contacted him, so he turned on his official suit and exited. He surveyed the command center when he arrived. An octagonal table resided in the back, and Lord Noskov, Lord Vigon, Mikhail, Robert, and Jake sat around and looked at a holographic projection. Dalton understood the technology was of Ciselter origin, since the base was theirs. He found it interesting that humanity was so far behind technologically compared to the non-human world. At some point, he suspected it would all balance out. Lord Noskov reminded Dalton of all the vampire descriptions he had read on his Earth. Lord Noskov had a black suit with a cape that had a red interior. He had pale skin, black eyes, and slicked-back black hair. Lord Vigon was less pale, but wore a suit of black, advanced, light armor. He was more personable than Lord Noskov, and Dalton liked Lord Vigon's fun personality. Mikhail had on his usual black, heavy armor, while Jake wore his standard light, padded suit. Robert wore slacks and a shirt, which was a stark contrast to the others. "Dalton," said Lord Vigon, waving Dalton over. "That's me," said Dalton, smiling as he took a seat. "You're looking all official," said Mikhail. Dalton shrugged. "It works. I can't exactly walk around in my Scout Spectre outfit." Robert laughed. "Yeah, that wouldn't be good." "What's going on?" asked Dalton. Lord Noskov nodded. "Before we begin, I wanted to say we're impressed by your abilities. You handled the blooded situation with ease." Dalton crooked a thumb at Mikhail. "I couldn't have done it without him." "It's okay," said Lord Noskov, raising a hand. "We're not suggesting that Mikhail underperformed. Although you and Everin already gave us a rundown of your abilities, it far exceeded what we expected. To that extent, we think you're ready to try a solo mission. It's one the Earth Ward has been tracking for a while, and they've asked us for help." Dalton grinned. "Sounds good to me." Lord Noskov nodded. "We're just glad to be in the presence of a cosmic being, and a little surprised Everin allowed it." "I only have a sliver of cosmic energy," said Dalton. "That's all it takes to be one," said Lord Vigon, smiling. "I get it. I'm just as surprised as you are. But Everin is okay with the Torvada's decision, as am I. Nonetheless, what's the case?" Mikhail chuckled. "This one has you written all over it." "Yes, it does," said Lord Vigon. He tapped at the table console. The projection changed to an overhead view of a city. Green dots flashed in various areas, with data labels hanging off each one. "This is Clarksville, Indiana. It's not usually a hotbed of unusual activity, but there has been some. Video feeds of retailers seem to have blocks of time missing, as do security cameras from other places." "You don't think it's just a random hardware or software issue, I take it?" said Dalton. Lord Vigon shook his head. "We don't. Normally, we would ignore this type of case. But there was a report that a nearby Earth Ward safe house was also hit. More importantly, All our monitoring programs in the local area stopped responding, and our access points are shut down. That simply doesn't happen." Dalton rubbed his chin as he studied the projection. "Do you mind if Evot has a look?" "Please do," said Lord Noskov. Dalton tapped at his right upper arm. A round disc emerged, with a nanoswarm around it. The disc separated, and the nanoswarm formed a gray cat. It jumped on the table and projected an image of a woman with short red hair, golden eyes, metallic skin, and a silver one-piece form-fitting outfit. Evot waved at everyone. She looked at Jake.
"Are you scanning me?"
Jake's eyes widened. "What? No!" The group chuckled. Evot smiled.
"I apologize. V told me he had a previous memory of asking you that."
"Oh, yeah. You four. V's previous incarnation," said Jake. He pointed at Evot. "I see how it is." "Evot." "Focus," said Dalton.
"Of course,"
she said. The projection vanished.
"What did you need?"
"Scan through all the data from that area using the Earth ward systems, at least until the monitoring ones were erased. Check if there are any patterns that emerge."
"I will."
She trotted over to a system port on the table and extended a segmented, metallic tendril from her paw. After a moment, she said,
"There is a time factor present."
Lord Vigon wrinkled his brow. "In what way?" The projection changed to show a slow-motion animation of the area as the blackouts occurred. A date and timestamp resided in the upper right.
"There is a pattern that shows something moving at a typical human pace from place to place. There are groupings by day as well,"
said Evot. Dalton rubbed his chin. "Since these timestamps are only from a few days ago, whatever is doing this most likely lives in the area. However, without the monitoring systems, we only have the blackouts up to a certain point and within a small region. I bet there's more if we can tap into the city's systems."
"That is a logical conclusion,"
said Evot. She sauntered over and merged back into Dalton's arm. Mikhail shook his head. "I'm not sure how we didn't see that pattern, or those other blackouts before. Because of the sheer amount of data to go through, not including the ability to recognize patterns at that level," said Lord Vigon, raising a finger. "That's trivial when you have a V or Evot, not so much when it's us. The Earth Ward only has one division that can do this, and they wouldn't allocate resources for a case like this, or for what they consider a low-priority city like Clarksville." Jake crooked a thumb at Dalton. "But we have him here now." Dalton nodded. "Whatever I can do to help, you'll have it." "Do you have an informant in the area?" "We do," said Lord Vigon. "We've already asked if she's seen anything. But it's the usual spotting of the Faith Militia, a few Daedrolls, an outsider, and a Wildborn. Do any of them have the ability to do something like this?" asked Dalton. Lord Noskov shook his head. "The Faith Militia is a human organization dedicated to the eradication of non-humans. They aren't the most tech-savvy. Most Daedrolls can't affect technology like that. An outsider might, depending on who it is, and the Wildborn could as well, depending on their ability." Dalton sighed. "So it could be any of them. Was there anything in the Torvada's knowledge base with that ability?" asked Jake. "Checking," said Dalton. He slid his finger across his left inner forearm and tapped at a few options. A screen popped up in his ARI, and he searched for anything with disruption in it. Although he did not have access to the Torvada anymore, he had downloaded a lot of information about this time period. There was still much to learn about. The Faith Militia was a good example. He focused on his ARI. One result was found. Looks like Everin ran into a Wildborn with the ability to affect technology. He called her a technomancer, said Dalton. "My money is on the Wildborn in that area, then, although how they're still alive is interesting. That's a Faith Militia hotbed. Tons of Slayers there," said Jake. "Slayers?" asked Dalton. Robert grinned. I can actually answer that one. They're what the Faith Militia calls their members. They're not too organized, but they can be quite dangerous. It's a slang term. Dalton nodded. Hopefully, I don't run into them when I go there. I'll need all the information on the local area before I go. Lord Vigon eased back into his seat. See, I knew you were the perfect person for this. I'll try my best, said Dalton. I know you will, said Lord Vigon. If you need anything while you're there, let us know. Dalton grinned. When do I leave? Dalton eased back into his chair aboard Jake's stealth ship. It was yet another reminder of how much further along the non-human world was compared to humanity. Jake's space-worthy ship would be ridiculed as nothing but a personal transport in an advanced civilization, but it would be groundbreaking if it were ever exposed on Earth. Jake also possessed knowledge that would probably get him killed if not for Lord Vigon's and Lord Noskov's protection. Dalton wore his official outfit, as he did not know what to expect once they landed. He looked out the window as they approached Clarksville. Farm fields with lonely country roads and a smattering of farmhouses dotted the land. He chuckled when he counted a high number of churches. It seemed religion was big in the area. As they neared the outskirts, he observed more buildings. They flew over a highway, which branched off to busy areas. It reminded him of a river and its tributaries. "Where's the safe house, exactly?" asked Dalton. "We're not far now," said Jake. "It's actually a compound in the northwestern area." "How is it kept secret?" Jake laughed. "Well, it's got a fence around the area for one thing. This place also has 2 guards, and most of the safe house has strong walls and tech. There's a pad in the back we can land on that looks like a helicopter pad." Dalton rubbed his chin. "So there's a possibility this person visited a nearby business and, while there, also impacted the safe house's systems." "That's what I'm thinking. I mean, right across the street is a big yard and then a retail store. I'm not sure how the Earth Ward's monitoring programs and access points got wiped, though. That seems crazy. If you check out the store, I guess you can see if maybe the monitoring program is still there but shut down or something." "I agree," said Dalton. He checked the time. It was almost 5:30 p.m. It felt good to match time with the environment, something that was not a given when he had been a scout specter on other planets. Jake shook a finger at him. "You got your work cut out for you." He reached into a small cubbyhole and pulled out a credit card. "If you need money, use this. It's tied to your bank account that we set up when you arrived and already has funds from the cases you helped with." "Ah, currency. I'll give the first Earth I travel to some credit in that department. A cashless society can work, but this Earth has a long way to go. Once matter replicators become common, though." "Yeah, I had to adjust to that too," said Jake. Dalton studied the landing pad as they approached. Jake was right that the compound was secured. A tall fence surrounded the square area, and a strong gate guarded the only entrance. The lone building in the middle was large, and he wondered how it protected itself from satellites. "Do you think this Faith Militia would attack this place?" Jake shook his head. "Slayers don't really mess with Earth Ward property. They hunt non-humans out in the wild and don't want the heat that comes from Earth Ward hunting them." "Doesn't the Earth Ward hunt Slayers due to what they do?" Jake sighed. "Unfortunately, the rule of law still applies, even to them. There has to be evidence. That's hard to find when they hit a house of non-human family, slice them up, then leave without a trace." Dalton's eyes narrowed. "So it's like a game of cat and mouse." "Yeah, and if they attack a safe house, Earth Ward will have a video feed of it and the surrounding area. Thankfully, whoever attacked the Earth Ward's digital presence in the city left the safe house alone." Dalton nodded as the ship landed. There was another fence that surrounded the pad. He thought he saw the fence move up some. Once they exited, Jake walked over to a locked gate and interacted with a nearby console. The gate unlocked. "Let's go," said Jake. Dalton surveyed the environment as they strolled across the yard. The walls were thick, and he spotted a few cameras around the area. There were some windows, but they were high up. One of the armed guards on the roof waved at Jake, who reciprocated. Apparently, the guard expected them. Jake tapped a door console, which caused a buzzing sound. He opened the nearby door. "In we go." Dalton followed him into a hallway that led to a circular hub. Hallways led off to the right and left, and the one opposite them ended with another door to the outside. In the middle of the hub area was a round enclosure where an armed male guard sat. Multiple screens ringed him, and he nodded as they approached. Jake crooked a thumb at Dalton. "This is Inspector Dalton Kingston. He's going to be operating out of here for a while. His case and credentials should already be in the system." The guard stood and pulled out a tablet-like device. He held it in front of Dalton. "Go ahead and place your palm on there." Dalton complied. The man took the tablet and sat. He tapped at his keyboard and studied the screens. His eyes widened. "Wow. He has Tier 1 clearance." He looked at Dalton. "You're an inspector, so I guess that's to be expected." Jake chuckled. "He'll need a car while he's here." "Of course. SUV's gassed up and ready to go," said the guard. He looked at Dalton. "You can use your hand to unlock areas. With your clearance, that's pretty much everywhere." He pointed down the right hallway. "Your room's that way, last one on the right." He gestured in the other direction. "Kitchen, med bay, and communications room are that way. Any questions, just ask." He extended a hand. "I'm Mike." Dalton shook his hand. Jake looked around. "Well, I better get back. You should have everything you need. And if you don't, you got Mike." "All right. I appreciate you flying me out," said Dalton. Jake shook Dalton's hand. "No problem. Good luck, and let me know when you're ready to head back." "Will do." Jake took off. Mike peered over the desk. "Traveling light?" "Food, drink, and a place to rest are all I need," said Dalton. "Damn, son. You're committed." "I suppose I am," said Dalton. "Were you the one who reported the hack?" "Yeah," said Mike. "Funny thing, none of our connections to the city work right now. We can't see shit." "That's odd." "Yeah, tell me about it. But I guess that's partially why you're here." Dalton smiled at him and then went right. Dalton liked the Earth Ward's safe house setup. With them sprinkled around major areas, he could see how the Earth Ward was set up to handle cases. Jake had mentioned the Earth Ward did not have the people to deal with its caseload. Dalton suspected that meant they did not have people qualified to do them. The room he entered was spacious. A bed was lined up against the back. A room to the side served as the bathroom, and he had a media center on the right wall. A desk and laptop sat at the front left corner. It would serve him well for what he needed. He stepped into the bathroom and studied the enclosed glass wall shower stall. Although his nanotech suit got rid of any dirt, it still needed to go somewhere. He turned on the shower and stepped inside. A quick rinse, and his suit deposited what little grime there was. After he turned off the shower, his suit vibrated, causing water to fly off. Once he verified his body was dry, he stepped out and dried his head. He took a seat at the desk and tapped his right arm. Evot jumped out in cat form. "Evot, this facility was reportedly hacked. Verify that," he said.
"Of course,"
said Evot. She jumped to the laptop and lay on it. A tendril slid out of her back and connected. Dalton did not worry about logins as Evot blew right past that. One of the advantages of having an AI. Her only weakness was dealing with more advanced security AIs, which was not something he expected to encounter on Earth, at least not this one. He eased back into his chair, spun around, and put his hands behind his head. With his ARI, he watched as Evot checked out the safe house systems. Evot flagged some porn sites Mike had looked at. Dalton raised an eyebrow. "Evot, I don't need to know that."
"It might be important. I wasn't aware human waste could be used like that."
Dalton grimaced. "Focus on anything unusual."
"Isn't that unusual?"
Dalton sighed. "Related to the hacking incident."
"Of course."
Dalton chuckled. Evot was originally an enhanced virtual intelligence that served as the ServBot's interface for over 70 years, but Everin had upgraded her. Evot had a lot to learn, and she was intensely curious. She was now self-aware, and it made her happy to know she was more than what she was created for. Dalton had come to rely on her, not only as a constant companion, but as one of his best friends. She was shackled to him via an augment, but she could put herself into one of the ServBots and explore around or form a holoshell to interact with others. Her favorite holoshells seemed to be a cat and a crow for blending in, although she used her human one often as well. After an hour, Evot said,
I found something. When the missing footage occurred at the nearby retailer, the safe house monitoring program lost connection. It assumed it was an attack when it couldn't restore a connection after 10 minutes.
It might have been an attack on the retailer, but not the safe house itself.
That's correct,
said Evot. She raised a paw.
It would have initiated an alert at the safe house.
I'm thinking Mike isn't tech-savvy.
That is my conclusion as well. I have also verified that the Earth Ward's monitoring programs are not responding, and their access points into other systems were closed.
Great. Dalton stood, and Evot jumped back onto his arm and merged in. Okay, let's check out that retailer. Chapter 3. Dalton drove to the retailer in the black SUV provided by the Earth Ward. Although he knew how to drive, it took him a moment to remember. The last time he had used a vehicle was over 80 years ago on his original Earth. There was not much to learn about how to steer, brake, and hit the gas, and he had already learned all the driving rules. It was vastly simpler than operating a Scout Spectre spaceship. The short trip across the road to the parking lot had been a good test, and he had no issues. After he parked, he walked to the store's entrance. The amount of people out and about surprised him, especially since it was getting dark. Sounds of thumping bass filled the air around him. He tracked it to a car, blasting some music. The carefree and casual nature on display made him stop and look around. After fighting everything from 500-pound-plus snake aliens to blooded vampires, it seemed surreal to see people walking around without a clue as to what was out there. The non-humans apparently did a good job of keeping things quiet. He continued on to the retailer. Several young males off to the side of the entrance smoked cigarettes. One of the fair-skinned boys with cornrows pointed at Dalton. "Check this dude out." The others laughed and slapped hands. Dalton paused to study them. He nodded and entered the store. This Earth's culture was different than the one he knew growing up, but he would adjust. The boy's words seemed mocking. Dalton realized his official outfit did stand out, but his Scout Spectre outfit would probably cause panic. It made sense to use his casual outfit, but he needed his official one if he was there on business. He could have used camouflage mode, but he needed to talk with people inside. Appearing out of nowhere would be as bad as having his Scout Spectre mode on. As he surveyed the store's interior, he spotted the customer service desk and approached. There was a line of people who looked miserable. One woman wore shorts that were way too small. Two young females loudly talked and used their phones. A man at the back of the line looked like he was ready to call it a day. Dalton did not plan to wait, so he marched up to the woman behind the counter. The permanent frown on her face indicated she probably hated her job. He pulled out his badge wallet and flashed his Earth Ward badge. "Inspector Dalton Kingston, Earth Ward. I'm here to talk with your loss prevention officer." The woman scowled. "The Earth what now?" People in line groaned. "Law enforcement," said Dalton with a smile. Her eyes widened. "Oh, you'll want Randy." "Randy it is." She picked up a phone and dialed. After talking for a brief moment, she hung up. "He's on his way." Dalton nodded. "Thank you." He passed the people in line who gave him dirty looks. They seemed to come alive at the thought that he had cut ahead. It would be better to wait somewhere a little less public. He found a somewhat isolated section outside the customer service area. 10 minutes later, a pudgy, fair-skinned man with a balding head hustled over and extended his hand. "Randy Collins, Loss Prevention. Inspector Dalton Kingston, Earth Ward," he said, returning the handshake. Randy wrinkled his brow. "I can't say I'm familiar with the Earth Ward." Enforcement agency approved by the United Nations, global jurisdiction. It was recently formed. And if you're unsure, you can call local law enforcement to verify. Randy nodded. "All right, I will. It's nothing against you personally, but I need to be thorough. I actually have a butt I can call. Excuse me." He pulled out his cell and stepped away. It would take a while for the Earth Ward to be a common name. Dalton was not sure why they did not use a well-known agency name like the FBI, but apparently there had been a fight over that. Randy returned. "You learn something new every day. Your group has higher jurisdiction than the FBI. What exactly do you do? I handle cases of a classified nature. And you're here? Dalton smiled. I am. Can we talk in your office? Sure, said Randy. After 5 minutes, they arrived. How can I help? Asked Randy. Dalton nodded. Your store had a recent blackout for 15 minutes 3 days ago. It also happened 2 days prior to that. How could you possibly know that? I can't say. However, I do need to take a look at your systems to see the CCTV coverage right up to that point and after. Randy nodded and sat at a desk with a large monitor. The screen was divided into 9 cells, each with a CCTV feed. Dalton nodded, then cleared his throat. I can take it from here. Don't you need me to pull the footage up? It's covered. Randy shrugged. Dalton reached into his pocket and had his MH form a USB end. He plugged it into the nearby computer tower.
I have connected to their systems,
said Evot over local comms. Dalton nodded. Randy stared at the screen for a moment, then looked at Dalton. Do you need to sit? I'm good standing, said Dalton. He studied his ARI when Evot found the missing footage. The CCTV lines stopped sending data as opposed to sending it, then it being erased. The small database that handled the CCTV feeds also had missing audit records. Evot had discovered the Earth Ward monitoring program. Its service had been stopped and the startup set to manual as opposed to automatic. She started it back up with no issue and configured the startup. That meant whoever did this had the power to disable the cameras and alter the monitoring program on the server. That must have been what occurred at other places in the area. I found what I came for, said Dalton. Randy frowned. But the screen didn't change. How did you find what you're looking for? Dalton smiled. I can't say. And you're really not going to tell me what all this is about? I'm a loss prevention officer, and I think I should know. Dalton studied him. Evot, pull up Randy Collins' family on the monitor. Randy looked around as if expecting to see someone. The screen changed to show a picture of Randy, his wife, and his son and daughter. Randy stared. Now show where Stanley plays baseball and his schedule, said Dalton. The screen displayed an image of a baseball field on one half and a calendar highlighting when Stanley played on the other. How? Asked Randy. Dalton gestured at the monitor. Now show where his wife does her grocery shopping. The screen showed several places with timestamps, then flipped back to the CCTV feeds. You just saw how easy it was for me to gather that data, said Dalton. Yeah? If anyone found out that you had any information on what I was investigating, you would be associated. If that were to happen, you would become a target. Randy's lower lip quivered. And my family would too? Sadly, yes. I'm telling you this so you understand the severity of what I'm working with, and what the Earth Ward works with in general. I understand, said Randy. He crooked his thumb at the monitor. How'd you pull all that up without using a mouse? Earth Ward tech, said Dalton. He did not want to explain how the Earth Ward had access to not only satellite imagery, but a database with billions of facial images, each linked to a personal file. It seemed crazy to him that the information was collected by companies and sold without user consent. Apparently, digital privacy was somewhat lax on this Earth. Getting personal data on Randy was a simple query that Evot could handle with ease, then display on the screen. Dalton unplugged his MH and put it back in his pocket. Randy puffed his cheeks. I'm gonna need to change my pants after this. Dalton laughed. You seem like a good person who enjoys his family. Keep my visit quiet. It could be dangerous if it were known that you talked to me. There's a camera in here, though. Yes, and it has been altered to show a loop of an empty room while I was here. The looping will end when I leave, said Dalton. Of course it will, said Randy. Dalton opened the door. Randy stood and took a deep breath. I get it. Good. Now close your eyes for 10 seconds. Huh? Dalton tilted his head. All right, said Randy, sighing. He closed his eyes. Dalton activated his camouflage shielding and exited the room. Randy would probably scour the CCTV feeds and search around, but he would find no trace of the visit. Dalton realized that anyone who saw him at the store might recall some details if asked, but he thought Randy had a grasp on keeping things quiet. Evot had even altered the cameras around the store so it looked like they never visited. Although the Earth Ward was a legitimate agency, Dalton liked to keep his visits confidential when investigating. He did not lie in mentioning that being associated could have implications. He had seen it occur many times before, but he did not think anything would happen to Randy. It was better to be safe than sorry. Dalton eased back into his car seat. The parking lot had emptied some, but there were still quite a few people out and about. His stomach rumbled. He probably should have eaten something before coming out. A burger and fries danced in his thoughts. The only matter replicators he knew about were back at Lord Noskov's base. What this Earth did have, though, were plenty of drive-through places to get food. With that in mind, he started the car and took off. 30 minutes later, he picked up a juicy quarter-pound burger and crispy fries with a soda. He had parked in such a way that he could watch people driving up to the drive-through lane and also walking into Burger House, the place he chose to try first. He had to give them credit. Their burgers were delicious. The fries had just the right consistency, and the soda provided a sweet taste. He reflected on how good it felt to eat non-replicated food without having to hunt it down. Evot had popped out into cat form and jumped on the dashboard. She seemed to enjoy being able to people-watch without anyone giving her a second glance. If she kept her spider look, he suspected people would panic. She would be educating herself about this Earth alongside him. It was a shared experience, and he looked forward to learning about everything together. Dalton wolfed down his meal after another 10 minutes and sat back. He focused on the case. All the other places that had disrupted video feeds probably also had altered servers with disabled monitoring programs. There would be no need to visit each one of them, although it would not hurt to check another out to verify the pattern. It was 8:15 p.m., and he had woken up that morning in Lord Noskov's base. With some food in him, though, he was not ready to call it a night. "You ready to check out another place?" he asked. Evot turned her head.
There is no need. We can access the city's traffic cameras and determine if a vehicle was used.
If this person had a car, then the disrupted traffic feeds would show a path right to where they are.
Yes.
Dalton's eyes narrowed. Then we need to find a traffic camera.
That's my conclusion,
said Evot. She jumped on the seat, then touched Dalton's arm with her paw and merged back in. Dalton started the car and drove off. The closest traffic cam was not hard to find. It was at the nearest traffic light, and the camera sat on a rod perched on the same bar as the lights. He parked in a nearby lot and lowered his window. "You're up," said Dalton. Evot jumped out of his upper left arm and formed into a large crow before flying out. Dalton loved her aerial mode. It allowed him to get a literal bird's-eye view of everything and, in this case, access a remote system in a hard-to-reach spot. She landed on the traffic light and moved over. When she neared the camera, a tendril snaked out from her clawed foot.
I have accessed this camera system, infiltrating the central location.
Dalton leaned back. Evot made everything so much easier. Without her, he would have had to climb up, jack in, and try to figure the system out. He smiled when a map appeared in his ARI. Traffic cams that had been momentarily disrupted appeared with timestamps. Whoever this was definitely had a car, and its path lit up brightly. It ended in a trailer park about 5 miles away. All right, Evot. I think we have our next stop.
Okay. I've also reactivated the Earth Ward's monitoring services, so we should have access to at least the traffic camera system.
Good work as always.
Of course,
she said. After she merged back into his arm, he drove off and followed the path that had been laid out. Green arrows appeared on the road, thanks to his ARI, which showed him where he needed to go. The technology level of this Earth already supported GPS navigation, but the interaction interface remained primitive. Humans still used screens and did not have holographic projections. However, humanity advanced fast, especially in the field of augmented reality. After 20 minutes, they reached the outskirts of a trailer park cut out of the woods. Dalton grinned. "Scouting time for you, Evot."
Of course,
she said. She emerged from both arms and transformed into crows. A moment later, she was airborne and flying over the trailer park. Dalton studied the layout that popped up in his ARI. Thankfully, it was dark out, so it would be hard to spot Evot's birds. Even if someone did, they wouldn't give it a second thought. The road he was on had a turnoff into the park, which contained a main road lined by trailers. A circular lot with a wide, red brick building sat at the far end of the main road. A small area near the entrance contained 2 large garbage bins. The stone wall that surrounded the trailer park seemed unusual. He had seen pictures of other parks in his brief time on Earth, and few possessed that feature. Life sign readings showed 56 people in the park, with some moving around outside. The area seemed well maintained. He grinned at a family outside, grilling. It reminded him of Robert and Jake. The building at the end had 2 people inside. Perhaps it was the park's office. Unfortunately, Evot could not read exotic energy signatures or view auras around people. For that, he would need to go in on foot. "Evot, I'm going in. Stay high and keep out of sight," he said.
Of course.
Dalton drove in and parked near the garbage bins. It might inconvenience anyone going there, but he did not plan to be there long. He exited the car and locked it. The night had a slight chill, but it was nothing he could not handle. After verifying no one was around, he activated his camouflage shielding. As he walked down the park's main road, he focused on extending his Everin sense. It possessed a decent radius and became more accurate the closer he got to something. While he might be able to detect non-human signatures within 50 feet, it was vague, but it was crystal clear at around 5 to 10 feet. That meant once he picked up on something, he would move in. Hopefully, there would be no issues, although he understood how it might appear if someone caught him snooping around their trailer. Camouflage shielding would help with that. Chapter 4. Brad Washington tried to relax with 5 others in the trailer, but he had detected the presence of 2 unusual non-humans in the area. One came from the building across the lot, and the other roamed around outside. He ran his dark-skinned fingers over his shaved head. His blood chilled as he wondered if he was pinned in. He was on the run, and his friend Gabe had been generous enough to offer him a place to crash in his trailer for the night. Brad did not know the other 4, although he knew they liked to drink. Not his scene. The unusual presence outside came closer. Brad's uneasiness ratcheted up. He eyed the door as the trailer suddenly seemed smaller. He had run into non-humans before who wanted nothing more than to drink him dry. Supposedly, wild-born blood tasted better. He tried to relax, but his muscles refused. Gabe approached.
"Hey, man. A beer for you." "Thanks, but I'm a little nauseous." "Aw, shit, man. That sucks."
Brad nodded.
"I'm just glad I have a place to stay for the night."
"My trailer is your trailer," said Gabe, slapping hands with Brad. Brad chuckled.
"Thanks."
Gabe adjusted his backward cap.
"You're not coming back to Orbit Industries?"
"Nah," said Brad.
"I'm done there. Anyone say anything?"
Gabe slapped Brad's arm.
"Mindy asked where you went."
"Mindy," they said and hummed in unison. They laughed.
I like the work, but working for Mr. Brennan is too much," said Brad. "Yeah, the guy's an asshole for sure, but he didn't run my department. I just make sure the databases run smoothly."
Brad looked around.
"And yet you live in a trailer?"
Gabe drew his head back.
"Man, fuck you. This is a deluxe trailer. Besides, I'm saving up for a house. I pay almost nothing out here."
He motioned at the 4 guys on the other side of the trailer.
"Besides, I work with them too."
"Doing what?"
Gabe smiled. "Stay around for a while and perhaps I'll tell you."
"All right," said Brad.
"Gabe,"
one of the other guys said.
Gabe looked over. "All right, I gotta go. Don't be a stranger, man. Come over if you get better."
Brad nodded. Gabe rejoined his buds. They clinked beers and guzzled them down. If they were aware of what the outside world was really like, they would arm themselves to the teeth. Brad did not want to mention that Orbit Industries hunted him. Gabe could not help, and if he got in the way, he would get hurt. Brad sighed. Gabe also did not know that Orbit Industries forced Brad to work.
Although he was not constrained there, they tracked him, and at the first sign of any deception, they would have killed him. That time was past, and after years of planning, he had escaped. He still worried he had missed something. Perhaps the unusual signatures outside were there to nab him. Normally, he could tell another non-human by their presence, but these two were different. He relaxed when the outside presence moved away. Time to go. If he stayed, he played with fire, and he was not a physical fighter. The unusual presences might be non-human bounty hunters. Brad did not want to put Gabe in the firing lane. Brad waved Gabe over. Gabe arrived and tipped his head up. "What's up?" "I'm gonna take off for a bit, grab some fresh air. Maybe that'll make me feel better." "Okay. I'll be here when you get back." "Sober?" "Hell no," said Gabe, laughing. Brad slapped hands with him. "All right, brother, party on." Brad slipped on his backpack. After a quick and awkward goodbye to the other guys, he left and got into his car. He half expected to be nabbed stepping out of the trailer, but there had been no movement. So far, so good. The unusual presences were now both in the building across the circular lot. He started his car, and after a few minutes, he exited the trailer park. There were not many places he could go, but he figured if he was ever going to be free of Orbit Industries, he needed access to some of their air-gapped systems. The real incriminating data resided there. Unfortunately, it sat in an office building in downtown Louisville. His next steps were a good dinner, a place to rest, then work time. He would need to infiltrate the building, and he suspected not everyone was aware he no longer worked there and was being hunted. A kill order on a former employee usually did not go public. He sighed. Although he had only been on this earth for 2 years, he was on the run again, like in the parallel Earth he fled from. Perhaps life was trying to send him a message, and not a good one. After almost 30 minutes, Dalton approached the circular lot at the end of the main road. The trailer park was bigger than the top-down view had led him to believe. He had discovered traces of 2 exotic energy signatures. One existed in the building across the circular lot, and the other resided in a trailer with 6 life signs inside. The signature in the trailer was a wildborn, but the one in the U-shaped building piqued his interest. He did not recognize the energy. He had decided which one to go after. The wildborn might be responsible for everything, but out of all the registered wildborn on the exhaustive Earth Wards list, only a few had technological ability. The person in the building was unregistered and might have unknown skills. He figured that since the building only had 2 life signs in it, it would be better to deal with them first than the 6 in the trailer with the wildborn. He planned to get both, but the one in the building would be first. He checked his energy levels. His camouflage shielding had been using quite a bit. Normally, he used it for short bursts, but this was unknown territory. He approached the building across the circular lot. The unusual energy reading grew stronger. He sensed its power even this far out. Per Evot's life form scans, 2 motionless people were in a small room on the 2nd floor. Dalton walked around the building and deactivated his camouflage shielding. He extended his hand towards several windows and emitted a golden beam, which swept across in an arc. A wireless security system guarded the house. He grinned. "Evot, scramble the house's security system."
Of course,
said Evot. She landed on the roof a moment later.
"Security has been disarmed. You can enter."
"Okay," said Dalton. He snuck around back and found a locked door. A quick scan determined the key needed, and he formed it with his MH. He unlocked the door and tried to open it, but a deadbolt on the other side stopped him. He sighed and placed his hand where the deadbolt would be. His vibrating hand chewed through the door and the bolt. "Evot, leave a servbot in the air, and use one to scout out the building," he said. Evot landed next to him and morphed into cat form. They entered a short hallway, and she scampered off. This was some type of office building. He activated his camouflage shielding and moved to the hallway end. A quick peek around the corner revealed an array of offices on the left side. An open area off to the right had some work desks. He crept along the wall while watching Evot's scans. She had moved up to the second floor and approached the room with the 2 life signs.
"One of the 6 people in the trailer with the Wildborn has left in a car,"
said Evot over comms. Dalton sighed. He could no longer detect the Wildborn. "Okay, capture the car and license information. We'll deal with that afterward," he whispered.
"Done."
Dalton approached a stairwell at the midway point of the building. He moved slowly until he reached it, then continued to the second floor while using Evot's scans to indicate where he should go. His camouflage shielding should hide him, but maybe not to the one with the strange, exotic energy readings. When he arrived at the room, he took a moment to survey the situation. A pale, barely conscious, semi-nude woman with black hair and bright blue eyes hung in chains from an upright wooden cross. She had cuts and bruises, and blood seemed to be everywhere. Across from her sat a young, tan male. He had a hat on backward and wore beige camouflage-patterned pants with a black shirt. A heavy beard rounded out his face, and several tattoos covered his arm. A bottle of whiskey sat on a nearby table next to an ashtray filled with cigarette butts. Dalton extended his badge wallet and deactivated his camouflage shielding. "I'm Inspector Dalton Kingston, Earth Ward." The man jumped out of his chair and stepped back. He grabbed a gun from behind a container on the table. "What the fuck?" "There's no need for the gun." The man licked his lips. "Earth Ward, why are you here?" Dalton slowly put his badge wallet away and extended a hand, palm forward. "I'm investigating a case, which led me here." He pointed at the woman. "She looks like she was tortured. She killed Zeke." "I'm not familiar with who that is." The man scowled. "And it'll stay that way." He fired. Dalton's eyes narrowed, causing everything to slow. His kinetic shielding lit up as the bullet hit, then fell. The shielding could only take so many hits before needing to be recharged. He did not want to waste a hit on this man, but it was too late. The man's eyes widened. Dalton rushed forward, grabbed the man's wrist, and squeezed. He dropped the gun. In one continuous movement, Dalton used his free hand to pull out his MH, form his stun baton, then tap the man in the chest with a light stun. Blue arcs danced around him before he collapsed. Dalton caught him and laid him down. Why he decided to shoot remained a mystery. Dalton's scan verified the man was alive but unconscious. Dalton was thankful a light stun could be used. A medium or a heavy one might be fatal, so he always tried it on the lowest setting first. That seemed to work on most humans. He had used a medium setting for the blooded. Dalton scanned the woman. Data labels with various metrics popped out to the sides of her in his ARI. She still lived, but barely, and she was definitely non-human. The man on the floor was human and possibly a slayer. Dalton undid her wrist and chest restraints and caught her as she fell. She stirred after Dalton laid her down. Her shallow breathing filled the air. In a weak voice, she said, "I need to drink blood." Dalton sighed. She could not have any of his, as his supercells would kill her. He looked over at the man. "If I let you have some of his, can you promise to keep him alive?" She nodded. Dalton grabbed the man and dragged him over, then placed his forearm in front of her. She put both hands on his forearm, then growled as she sank her fangs into his flesh. Dalton grimaced. This woman was a vampire, but she did not have Daedrold energy, which all vampires on Earth did from what he understood. She was unique. He watched her for 5 minutes as she did one continuous pull. He tapped her hand. "Remember, he's to be kept alive, or we're going to have a problem." She pulled back and sat against the wall. Blood ran down her lips. "I have enough, but I'll need a moment for it to kick in and heal me." "Okay," said Dalton, taking the seat the man had used earlier. "I can sense your exotic energy. You're not a Daedrold." She smiled. "No, I'm not. I'm a Zakarian. Valerie Simmons, by the way." "Inspector Dalton Kingston, Earth Ward." "Earth Ward? You're the last person I expected to see. They hate me." He nodded and slid his finger across his left inner forearm. He perused his ARI. "Earth Ward doesn't know your exotic energy type. That's odd. I guess, she said. Why does that matter? It doesn't. I do know you're an outsider from another dimension. Nonetheless, what do you call your exotic energy? Valerie studied him. You are curious. I don't know what the energy is that makes us Zakarian. No problem. Once you're able to walk, I can get you to an Earth Ward safe house. They have blood stored on the premises. That'd be great. Assuming they let me in, she said. What do you mean? Valerie sighed. I have had a few run-ins with them. They were bloody. Dalton checked her Earth Ward profile again. There's nothing on your profile that says you're wanted for anything. Some fights were recorded, but you're clear. Well, that's a relief then. Valerie looked around and found her clothes in a nearby bag. A minute later, she was dressed and moving normally. Evot contacted Dalton over comms.
There are 8 individuals advancing toward the building.
Dalton's eyes narrowed as he glanced at Valerie. Do you know anything about the people approaching this building? She sighed. You do know we're in the middle of a Faith militia cell, right? I'm here because I killed Zeke, their leader. She pointed at the man on the ground. You stunned his son, Craig, but you let him get a shot off. I didn't think he'd fire, said Dalton. Well, now the rest of the Slayers out there know there's something going on here, and you better believe they're coming here armed to the teeth. They probably think there's a rescue mission going on, or whatever. Dalton sighed. He studied the overhead view more closely. The Slayers had covered all sides of the building, leaving 4 men with tactical gear and assault weapons to approach the front door. We can't stay here, said Dalton. I can move, but don't expect me to run just yet, she said. She grabbed Craig's gun from the ground. Dalton eyed her. Lethal means only as a last resort. Oh, you're one of those types. Is that a problem? She chuckled. No. I understand you're afraid to kill. First time is always the hardest. You misunderstand. I have over 342 confirmed kills. Life is precious, and it shouldn't be taken with ease. Her eyes widened. Okay. Dalton studied the situation. Evot had a servbot inside and one outside, providing a view. If he sent the one outside to get the car, that would leave him without a top-down view. One servbot would be needed to escort Valerie out. Going out the front would be risky with such heavy coverage. He would need to go out a side door, but the Slayer's weapons were formidable with range. Whatever he did, he needed to do it quickly, as the men would be at the front door in a few minutes. After taking a minute to think it through and surveying what he had at his disposal, Dalton formed a plan. Evot would keep one servbot in the air, and the other would escort Valerie to the car. He would need to handle the Slayer at the southeastern back door so Evot and Valerie could escape. Before that, the 4 Slayers approaching the northern door needed to be dealt with. Evot and Valerie went to the southeastern back door and waited. Dalton rushed downstairs and grabbed the water cooler in the corner. He emptied it all over the hallway that led to the front door. Thankfully, the floor was tiled, so the water pooled. He positioned himself around a corner out of line of sight from the front door. Although his camouflage shielding would normally be on, Evot had detected the Slayers wore thermal goggles. Apparently, they were used to hunting non-humans in the dark. Range would be needed for this part. He activated his RSG and waited. Light shone under the door. "Come out, whoever you are," said a man. "We know you're in there. Craig wouldn't fire for the hell of it." "Then come get me," said Dalton. A shotgun blast ripped through the front door and blew it apart. Dalton's heart pumped faster. Normally, he would not be worried about handling this situation, but he had an escort to protect. Those were always the hardest since they were typically the weak point. 2 men burst in and aimed to the sides. "Clear," said one man. The third one entered. Dalton fired a medium stun shot at the water. The floor lit up and shocked the men. A moment later, they collapsed. "We got men down!" shouted the 4th man. Dalton sensed the Slayer outside was young, and he did not try to help those who were downed. Dalton suspected the man was paralyzed with fear. That could be used. More importantly, for the cost of 2 energy charges on his RSG, he took down 3 attackers. That left 22 charges. He used a medium stun since there were 3 men instead of 1, and the water would have dulled it some. He hustled over to Valerie and Evot. He glanced at Valerie. "You ready?" "Yeah, I think," she said. "Just follow the cat that somehow talks, right?" "You got it," said Dalton. "Nothing strange about that." "I take it you got the 4 at the door." Dalton sighed. 3. Nonetheless, I need to clear a path for you. Wait here." He motioned for them to get out of line of sight. Once they were in position, he approached the back door. His senses told him there was a heavy-set man with a shotgun outside. He probably had slow reflexes based on his erratic breathing. Dalton switched his RSG out for his stun baton. He placed his shield out front and barged out the door. A shotgun blast hit his shield. Dalton paused, then charged forward and shield bashed the shotgun away. He used his stun baton to hit the man in the chest. He crumpled to the ground. "Come out," said Dalton. He led them to the edge of the forest and motioned at it. "Go. Evot will escort you back to the SUV. Evot, bring it over when you get there. I'm going to take down the rest of these guys."
"Of course,"
said Evot. She ran into the forest with Valerie in tow. Dalton still had 4 to deal with. There was one outside the north door, one at the northeast corner, another at the northwest corner, and the last one at the southwest corner. He decided to take down the one coming from the northeast side first. A quick check of the top-down view showed that the men tried to catch him in a pincher move. He moved to the southeast corner and looked north. "He's over here," said a man rushing down the side of the building. He opened fire with his assault rifle. Dalton ducked around the corner. He grimaced as a shotgun blast hit him. The slayer coming from the southwest had entered shooting range. Although shotguns were not an accurate weapon at that distance, the spread was wide enough that it still hit him. He needed to move. The pellets did not pierce his skin, but they had left some bruising. His supercells worked to heal him. Unfortunately, he would have to live with the pain for the moment. He held his stun baton in his left hand and formed his RSG. After taking aim, he stunned the man coming from the southwest. Dalton checked the top-down view. The slayer approaching from the northeast had taken an angle instead of coming straight down and now had Dalton in his sights. The man opened fire. Dalton dove back into the building, but not before several bullets hit him between his armor pads. One penetrated his thigh, and another struck him in the upper arm. He cursed himself for losing focus. The pain was immediate, but not life-threatening. Thankfully, his pads took most of the damage, but they did not cover his whole body. If he had raised his shield, he would have still been hit, but maybe not as much. That was one of the shield's downsides, in that it could block completely if he was crouched, but not standing. He tasted blood. That was not something he had experienced in a long while. He needed to move so he would not be in line of sight of the slayer. With that in mind, he moved down the hallway and around a corner. The slayer kept his distance from the door and angled himself to obtain line of sight into the building. Dalton sensed the slayer slowly approaching the building. A quick check from the top-down view gave him the location of the other 2 men. The one frozen in fear at the northern door was still there, but the slayer from the northwest side was moving to the front door. Pain from his wounds jabbed at him, and Dalton grimaced. He was in a bad position and had to relocate. It hurt to move his right arm and leg, and he could sense the bullets in him. His sides were on fire from the shotgun blast, and it took a moment for him to catch his breath. Although used to combat, he usually did not go against more than a handful unless he had a group. 8 was stretching it, and as he found out, primitive weaponry was still powerful. If he had a few hours, he could get healed back to full strength. He gathered his senses and hunkered in one of the side offices. The slayer from the northwest reached the front door and checked the men on the ground. Dalton could not believe his luck. He formed his RSG and hit the man, who fell over the other bodies. 2 to go. Dalton focused and listened. The slayer that came in the back door crept through the hallway and was about to pass the office. With only a thin wall between them, Dalton kicked through, sending the slayer tumbling. Dalton retracted his RSG and used his stun baton on the man. He stopped moving. With new determination, Dalton rushed to the front hallway corner with his shield out. The man out front fired a shotgun blast into the building. Although Dalton had been out of line of sight of the blast, he was tired of getting shot at. He charged out. The startled Slayer took off. Dalton overtook him and hit him in the back with his baton. The Slayer crashed to the ground and went limp. The top-down view now showed the area clear of assailants. Dalton walked over to the man and verified he was young. Perhaps that was why he hesitated entering combat earlier. It angered Dalton that he had taken any damage at all. He focused on the car blazing down the main road.
"We're coming,"
said Evot over comms. "Good. I got them all," said Dalton, grimacing.
"You're hurt,"
said Evot. "Yeah, just a few bullets and some bruising from shotguns. We can deal with that later."
"I will provide assistance when I get there."
"I appreciate the thought, but this is still a hot spot."
"Okay,"
she said. A small girl ran over to the downed Slayer near Dalton. He tilted his head. Another man ran after the girl. Dalton put his MH back on his thigh and formed his RSG. He took aim. The man raised his hands. "Whoa, whoa, whoa there, buddy." "Are you a Slayer?" asked Dalton. The man licked his lips. "Yeah, but I wasn't part of this. I just got here a few minutes ago." Dalton studied the little girl, crying her dad's name as she tried to wake him. "Is he dead?" asked the man, pointing at the downed one. "No, he's unconscious, as are all the others," said Dalton. "I don't kill unless it's a last resort." Evot arrived and parked near Dalton. She, in her humanoid form, and Valerie joined him. Dalton eyed the man. I should call this in. These men would be going away for a while. He looked at the little girl, and his throat constricted. But I'm not going to do that. He focused on the man. "For that, you owe me, all right? What's your name?" "Todd Armani." "Who the hell, or rather, what are you?" "You're an alien, aren't you?" "No, I'm not an alien. I'm Inspector Dalton Kingston, Earth Ward. I'm giving these Slayers a chance to stop slaying, and if they violate that, I'll be back," he said. He looked over at Valerie. "Same goes for you with killing Slayers." "They deserve it," said Valerie. "You killed Zeke from what they said," said Todd, pointing at her. "Yeah, because he murdered my sister, who had an occasional drink of blood from her consenting partner. For that, she and her daughter were slaughtered. They never hurt anyone." Todd drew his head back. "I heard you were an assassin." "Yeah, I might kill Slayers, but she was a teacher. Zeke went after my family. You think I'd let that go, knowing what I do? If you had a brother, would you sit back if I came in and killed him?" Todd sighed. "No, I'd come gunning for you." Dalton gestured at Valerie, just like she did for Zeke. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry to hear about your sister." Valerie's face softened. She had probably never heard a Slayer apologize, and Todd was not even involved, at least as far as Dalton knew. "All right," said Dalton. "This is how it's going to be. We're leaving, and you, Todd, will relay my second chance message." He gestured at Evot. "She now knows their faces and has all sorts of information on them, which means I do too by extension. I'll be watching." He looked at Evot and Valerie. "I'm exhausted. Let's get out of here." Todd ran over to console the little girl. Dalton still had the Wildborn to check out, and he did not think Valerie was the cause of the blackouts. He sighed. For now, the focus would be getting back to the safe house and resting. He had had enough for the night. Chapter 5. Dalton grunted as he lay on a slab while Evot removed the bullets in his body. She was in her humanoid shell form, and he was thankful she had medical knowledge as part of her initial programming. She had to use his MH with a vibrating knife to cut his skin. Valerie was in the kitchen, sucking down blood bags the safe house kept on hand. They needed to be replenished, and he suspected this was probably the first time they had been used in a while.
"Please stop moving,"
said Evot. He sighed. "You're not the one with bullets in you."
"I'm not. But this is delicate. While your supercells regenerate everything, they're doing so around the bullets. They must be out before that happens."
Dalton smiled. "I'll hold still. And thank you."
"Of course."
He went over the fight in his mind. There were several other tactical approaches that might have yielded better outcomes. The Slayers were well-equipped, and he suspected they had killed many non-humans. They showed no fear, except for the one who ran, and Todd. Dalton probably should have left with Valerie and Evot, but that could have drawn unnecessary attention to Valerie. Another approach would have been to stay inside, force the Slayers down a hallway, then charge them. They would be reluctant to fire in such close proximity. The only problem would have been if they kept him cornered and tossed grenades. Although he did not see any, he did not put it past the Slayers to use them. It was his first encounter with them, and he learned a lot. His shield had performed admirably, but his camouflage shielding had been useless. The stun baton and RSG also did well, and he would recharge them. His supercells kept him going, and without them, it would have been a much tougher fight. His Everin sense told him where they were, but so did his eyes and ears. Nonetheless, he had an encounter to learn from. Mike entered the room.
Dalton, sorry, Inspector Dalton. You said you fought 8 Slayers?
I did. Mike exhaled loudly.
That's crazy, son.
Dalton shrugged, making Evot glare at him.
Sorry.
Mike studied her. Dalton sensed Mike's heartbeat increase and his eyes dilate. Evot's form seemed attractive to him. Given what Dalton saw in Mike's browsing history, he seemed to enjoy Rule 34, where if something exists, there was probably porn for it. He spent a lot of time on fantasy shows. Mike cleared his throat.
Yeah, man, 8. Wow. 1 or 2 is a good scrap. 3 to 4. Run. More than that is suicide. Yet here you are.
Here I am, said Dalton, grinning. I could have done better.
I agree,
said Evot.
I analyzed the fight, and you underestimated them. You should have gone in a circle and used your shield and RSG to hit each in sequence.
Yeah, probably. Mike wrinkled his brow.
Why would you underestimate them? They're Slayers.
Dalton sighed. When you fight what I have in the past, taking on unarmored humans seems less daunting.
Okay. But did you take on whatever it was 8 at a time?
Over 30. Evot shook her head.
You also had a powerful group with you. You were alone out there tonight.
Dalton eyed her, then looked away. She was right. After traveling with Everin, it seemed like fighting humans should be simpler. The ease with which Dalton and Mikhail took down the blooded vampires earlier had also boosted Dalton's belief that fights would be easier. That was mostly a close-quarters fight where he excelled. The fight at the trailer park was range for the most part and spread out where heavier weapons could be used. He had miscalculated and now paid the price for it.
I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to, or if you're pulling my leg, said Mike. Then again, Evot is an android or something, so who knows?
A minor correction. I'm an artificial intelligence who controls 2 servbots, and my neural net is fused within Dalton as an augment,
said Evot, looking over at Mike. His eyes widened.
Oh, right. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Earth Ward and all that. I mean, hell, there's a vampire in the other room slurping down blood bags like they're going out of style.
Dalton nodded.
Her name is Valerie Simmons.
She's registered with the Earth Ward, but she's different than the vampires I've met.
Right. And you know a lot of them.
Only the ones I've met since coming to this Earth. Mike rubbed his chin.
I knew you weren't from around here, but wow, you're really not from around here.
You could say that, said Dalton. Obviously, I can't talk about it, and anything I discuss with you is confidential.
Mike straightened. You got it, man. We usually don't see much traffic through here, so this is busy for us.
Do you have family? Asked Dalton.
Divorced, but got a kid.
He's only 8, said Mike. Dalton nodded. Do you worry about him since you work for Earth Ward?
Mike shrugged. Some, but now that I'm aware of what's out there, I'd rather be informed than not. Plus, if somebody messes with me or my kid, Earth Ward handles it. Probably send someone like you.
Dalton sensed Mike had a rough life and was trying to make the best of it. He had a point about being safer with what was out there. Any non-human would think twice about attacking an Earth Ward family. As Mike and his kid were humans, Slayers wouldn't go after them unless they wanted to start a war with the Earth Ward. Someone screws with you or your family, you can contact me directly, said Dalton. Mike grinned. I knew I liked you. They shared a laugh. What are you going to do for the rest of the night? Asked Mike. Dalton studied the ground for a moment. I need to talk with Valerie. Then I'm going to get some rest. Heal up and recharge. Oh, I got you, said Mike, looking down. Tell you what. Once this is wrapped up, I'll stick around some before heading back and we can hang out some. I suspect you have a lot of questions. Mike looked back up. Hell yeah, I do. Dalton chuckled. He understood Mike's curiosity, but Dalton also realized some things needed to be kept secret. He did not mind sharing information about his past, and Mike seemed like a good person. Evot pulled out the final bullet, and Dalton winced. All that was left was to patch it up, and his supercells would handle the rest. Mike studied the bullets in the silver tray. Damn. You got shot up. Sure did. Did you kill those Slayers? Asked Mike. Dalton shook his head. I only do that if need be. They were rendered unconscious. One of the Slayers was not involved in the fight, and I told him to tell the others that when they wake, they have a second chance if they quit slaying. Mike nodded. That's good to hear. But I doubt they'll stop. If anything, you're now a high target. It wouldn't be in their best interests. Mike chuckled. I grew up around here. They don't think like that. You fought some good old boys who happen to like killing non-humans, and you embarrassed them. They're gonna come gunning for you. Evot looked at Mike.
Would they attack here?
Nah, but if they catch you outside, said Mike, tilting his head right, then back. Got it, said Dalton. The safe house was living up to its name in a Faith militia hotbed. Dalton would make sure he asked Mike more about them before taking off. It sounded like he probably knew a few.
All done,
said Evot, standing back. Mike smiled at her. That's a nice job.
Thank you,
she said, smiling back. Yeah, I'm cool. Dalton and Evot stared at him. I mean, you're cool. It's cool, said Mike. He licked his lips. I'm, gonna go check on the safe house systems. He exited the room.
Did I do something wrong?
Asked Evot. Dalton laughed. No, you didn't. I think he's just nervous around you.
Because of what I am?
I think it's a bit more primal than that, said Dalton. He stood and stretched. Still hurts, but I can feel the area's healing. It's time to talk with Valerie. You gonna merge back or want to stay out?
I'd like to stay out. I'm enjoying organic interaction.
He nodded. I'm glad you can enjoy it. She nodded. Dalton gestured at the door. All right, let's get this over with so I can get some rest. Valerie relaxed in a chair by the refrigerator. 2 drained blood bags rested on the table near her, and she slurped on another one. She looked rough, and some rest would probably do her good, but Dalton sensed she was uncomfortable being in the safe house. Her history with the Earth Ward was documented, and it surprised him that they went easy on her. Some of the incidents he read about seemed like they would want to take her in. He understood her surprise when they met, and he introduced himself as being with the Earth Ward. He pulled up a chair across the table from her, as did Evot. Feeling better? I am now, said Valerie as she put a blood bag down. Evot rose and got some paper towels from a nearby dispenser. She placed them next to Valerie. Thank you, said Valerie.
Of course,
said Evot. Dalton wondered how Valerie's kind survived as long as they did in a world of daydrolls. I have a few questions, if you don't mind, before I rest for the night, said Dalton. Valerie nodded. Fire away. I won't be here for long. All right. In relation to the case I'm working, do you possess any ability that interferes with technology? Valerie laughed. I wish. No, but I do get heightened senses, reflexes, and regeneration from drinking blood, similar to most types of vampires. I see, said Dalton. When you were in the trailer park, did you notice a wild-born around? Yeah, I did. Dark skin, shaved head, wore black clothing, and... Oh, his shirt had some metal band on it. Well, I think it was metal, not sure. Might be punk or something. Dalton gestured at Evot.
Show the footage you captured when he left.
Of course,
said Evot. She extended her hand, palm up, and projected a zoomed-in image of a man about to get in his car.
Did he look like that?
Asked Dalton. That's him, said Valerie. Dalton rubbed his chin.
And you don't know anything about him?
Valerie shrugged. Other than he's wild-born? No. As a general rule, you don't mess with them. Their abilities are usually not documented well, and sometimes they're not aware of what they can do. A year ago, one of my assassin friends took out a wild-born woman who had the ability to change bones to mush. She was hunted nonstop by humans and non-humans, and she couldn't control her power.
No one tried to help her.
Valerie shook her head. Non-humans sensed what she was and attacked. Slayers didn't care who she fought. To them, she was different and needed to die.
Dalton sighed. That's ridiculous. I'm guessing the wild-born in the park has an ability to talk to technology. That's easy to mask, much less so compared to converting bone to mush.
Yeah, probably.
Why didn't the hunted woman go to the Wildhaven Institute?
I don't think she knew she was a wild-born, and she definitely wouldn't have known about that place. Dalton understood that wild-born blood was intoxicating to vampires, but he did not fully understand the hatred from other non-humans. Valerie had frowned when talking about the man in the park and the hunted woman. Her disgust was written all over her face. If Dalton captured the wild-born from the park, he suspected the Earth Ward would not be kind to him. He would ensure that was not the case. As an outsider to non-human politics, Dalton would be coming in like a wrecking ball.
So you're an assassin. Where do you get contracts from?
He asked. All over, said Valerie. There's quite a few underground places to check, and they pay well. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you where they are.
Why not?
Asked Evot. Valerie laughed. Right. And have that tracked back to me so I can have over 100 bounties on me? Yeah, no thanks. She glanced at Dalton. I'll honor your request to stop killing slayers since you saved my life. There's other contracts I can do that pay just as well. Evot tilted her head.
Like what?
You're quite the inquisitive one, said Valerie.
I am, and I'm still learning about organic interaction,
said Evot, smiling. Valerie chuckled. I feel like I am too sometimes. I think you're the first AI I've ever talked to. Nonetheless, as to what other types of contracts, I do intelligence gathering, roughing up, sex, locating people. That's only a few. Evot studied Valerie for a moment.
You have sex for money.
That's what you honed in on? Asked Valerie, smirking. To answer your question, sometimes. The last one I did was for a few grand. All I had to do was sneak into a mansion, meet up with a rich businessman and his wife, then role-play an assailant and rock the wife while he watched in another room via camera.
Interesting.
Dalton cleared his throat.
All right, back on topic. I appreciate you honoring my request. As for the slayers in that trailer park, you killed their leader. I suspect they'll want revenge, but if they do, they'll violate the second chance I gave them.
I like you, said Valerie. I don't know if you're clueless or flat-out nuts. Of course they're going to come for me. They're not honoring your second chance. If you're being serious about enforcing it, I would start planning that as soon as possible.
Dalton is serious about enforcement,
said Evot. Valerie scrutinized him. I sense that about you, and you may be one of a handful who might be able to back it up. Speaking of which, Evot said you came from a parallel Earth and jumped across like 10 of them. On top of that, you traveled with Everin and fought some snake aliens or something. Dalton sighed and glanced at Evot.
Usually, that's not to be spoken of.
She's all right, said Valerie. I asked her in the car before we picked you up. She was quite forthcoming, which, honestly, was a breath of fresh air. Evot frowned.
I apologize if I shared too much information.
It's okay, said Dalton. Think of it as a teaching moment.
Of course,
she said, perking up. What parallel Earth did you come from? Asked Valerie. Dalton grimaced. one that had been turned into a radiated wasteland and was filled with aggressive mutants. Not a problem for someone with your technology. Dalton shook his head. I may be the most advanced human on this planet, but I wasn't on my Earth. I got most of my gifts from the first parallel timeline I jumped to. Valerie scrunched her face. Timeline. I probably shouldn't go any further on that topic. You can think of it as parallel Earths. Okay. And Everin? He's a supposed godlike being who travels around space and time, and you traveled with him and fought snake aliens? Dalton nodded. And that's it. He grinned. It's best you not learn any more about that than you already know, Mr. Mysterious, said Valerie. It's okay. We all have secrets, like the strange reading I get from you. Your exotic energy is powerful. What is it? Unusual, said Dalton, smiling. Valerie eyed him. And that's all you're going to say about that, isn't it? It's better that way, I guess. Well, if you're done with the interrogation, I could use a shower and some rest. Then I'll be on my way. Dalton studied her. Where do you plan to go? I'm not sure yet. Somewhere away from here for sure. I have several hideouts I can hit up. I could have the Earth Ward give you a ride. Valerie sighed. It's not that I don't trust you, fully, that is, but the Earth Ward, it's probably best that I avoid any interaction with them.
You distrust them,
said Evot. When you do what I do, you see a darker side of things, said Valerie. The idea of the Earth Ward is good. The execution leaves a lot to be desired. Dalton nodded. I understand. No organization is perfect. However, now that I'm here, I won't tolerate the Earth Ward being dishonorable. And you're going to do that as an inspector? Partially. I have the backing of Lord Vigon and Lord Noskov. Valerie's eyes widened. The ancient vampires? Yes. Oh. And they know I'm here? No. I haven't been back to their base or contacted them. Valerie exhaled loudly. Okay, well, I'm going to shower, then I'm out of here.
I thought you needed rest,
said Evot. The ancient vampires want me dead. I'm not sticking around for that, said Valerie. She stood and gestured out. Look, I appreciate the help back there, but I'm going to get out while I'm still ahead. I hope you find what you're looking for. Dalton stood and extended his hand. I understand. I wish you luck in your endeavors. Evot replicated his action.
I do as well.
Valerie chuckled and shook their hands. You two are quite the duo. She hustled out of the room.
I find it odd that the Earth Ward is not pursuing her, but the ancient vampires want her dead,
said Evot. Dalton sighed. Yeah, but there's a lot we don't know. All we can do is learn as we go. Evot looked down.
I agree, and I apologize again for sharing information.
It's okay. I'm going to hook up to an outlet and get some sleep. Evot nodded.
I'll stand guard around the building.
Whatever you want to do. She nodded and exited the room. One aspect Dalton was concerned about was her quickness to trust others. Although she had interacted with organics as a VI for most of her existence, her only experience as an AI with organics was from the last month and a half, and she was around people he trusted. Now she was out in the world, and one thing he understood well was that you had to be careful of who you placed your trust in. Chapter 6. Dalton woke up and smiled. His wounds had healed, and he felt much better than the previous night. His MH, RSG, and suit were charged. That was due to plugging his MH into the nearby electrical outlet and running a cord from that to his suit while he slept. Another aspect he had come to love about waking up was his cosmic energy. It pulsed with life through him and reminded him of what he had gained. An outlet was a slow way to recharge, but it was free. He opened his eyes and raised his head to investigate the unusual weight on his chest.
You're up,
said Evot in her gray cat form. Dalton yawned. Apparently so. I see you enjoy your cat form.
It's pleasing,
said Evot.
I can infiltrate areas efficiently in this form. However, I think I gave Mike a scare.
She hopped to the side as Dalton rose up on his elbows. Doing what? He asked. Evot smiled.
He tried to pet me and asked how I got in, and I told him I was checking the perimeter.
Dalton laughed. He imagined the surprised look on Mike's face. It was not every day that someone saw a talking cat.
We talked for a bit, and then I roamed outside while keeping a serve-bot here,
she said. Dalton grinned. Good. He sat up. I take it our friend Valerie Simmons is gone. Evot jumped off the bed and morphed into her human form.
She is, but she told me to tell you that she really appreciated the help, and she wished she would have met you under different circumstances.
Dalton sighed. Non-human politics was complicated. The Earth Ward did not want her, but the ancient vampires issued a kill order, or so she claimed. He understood her cautiousness and would inquire further when he returned to Lord Noskov's base. His mind turned toward the Wildborn from the trailer park. By process of elimination, he had to be the culprit, as Valerie was far from a technical guru. Did you track the Wildborn any last night? He asked.
I did,
said Evot.
He took off to Louisville, the large city south of here. His car is parked in an underground garage.
Have you determined his reason for being there? She shook her head.
It seems to be an office building. Perhaps he was going to work.
Maybe. After I get cleaned up and some food in me, we'll leave. She nodded and touched his arm before merging back into him. He enjoyed that Evot was becoming more independent, but she also was comfortable riding on him in the specialized storage units built into his upper arms. The central part of each servbot and the accompanying nanobots were not heavy, although he could tell the difference when they were stored. He did a final look around the room and hit the shower. Although he did not need a full one, he enjoyed the routine of soaping up and letting the warm water flow over him. It reminded him of times long ago when he fought with his kids to get bathroom time in the mornings. A lump formed in his throat, thanks to the Torvata, which gave him his cosmic energy and Torvata touch. He had been able to see his family one last time in the dream layer, a reality far away. Although he did not fully understand how that worked, he appreciated the opportunity. Small things like showering brought their memories up. Once he turned the water off, he vibrated his nanosuit, which dried him off. He exited the shower and used a towel on his face and hair. He still needed to shave every few days, but today he did not have to. He wished he could wear his helmet all the time, but that would not fly on this Earth. Once he verified he was good to go, he morphed his nanosuit to his official outfit. He liked how it looked, and it still allowed him to use his MH, which remained holstered on his right thigh. The RSG was available in all modes. Although he had considered a trench coat, it would make fighting more difficult. The official suit contained enough flexibility to allow him to move quickly if need be. He could switch to his Scout Spectre outfit, but he reserved that for heavy combat. Breakfast flew by, and the only noise came from a television mounted on the wall. Mike was gone, and James, a young, athletic, dark-skinned man with a military haircut, took his place. James introduced himself and made small talk. He probably wanted to discuss deeper topics, but there was a Wildborn who needed caught. Dalton did not reveal any case specifics, and his clearance level most likely invited curiosity. The safe house was quiet for the most part, and Dalton figured James appreciated having anyone around. It did not take long for Dalton to get into the SUV and drive off. As he drove, he studied the myriad of people going about their day. Traffic was congested as expected, and he smiled at how normal everything looked. He suspected most would lose their minds if they truly knew what lurked around them and off-planet. A memory of a Kregan hunter stopping by Lord Noskov's base crept into Dalton's thoughts. The hunter possessed similar advantages to Dalton, but no cosmic energy or Torvata touch. The Kregans were purple-skinned humanoids. A curved cone shape on the back of their heads was hard to miss, but they used a hollow shell while on Earth to blend in. From what Dalton understood, Kregans possessed superior physical and mental abilities relative to a human. The hunter had been surprised the Kregan Star Empire allowed Dalton to remain on Earth, but the Kregan Emperor himself allowed it due to Everin's request. It did not get much higher than that. Apparently, the validation carried weight in Kregan circles, and the hunter had been thrilled to meet Dalton. Dalton had reviewed some of the hunters' cases, and they all dealt with removing aliens that tried to hide out on Earth. Besides knowledge pollution, these alien refugees were often violent, and human casualties resulted from that. The Earth Ward was more than glad to have the help of the Cregan hunters. Dalton focused on the highway. The gridlock did not faze him, and he took the time to reflect on how much life surrounded him, from the guy in the truck who spit chew continuously into a cup, to the exasperated woman arguing with 2 kids in the rear seat of her station wagon. The sun warmed the SUV, and Evot took advantage of that while she lay on the dashboard in her cat form.
"Evot, what do we know of the area we're going to other than it's an office building?" he asked.
Per the Earth Ward knowledge base, there are several human criminal factions. There are also a few outsider groups, and one is run by a council of those who claimed godhood.
Dalton shook his head.
Outsiders were beings from other dimensions, and when they came to Earth in the past, they were worshipped as gods. Even now, they ran the Imperium, one of the most powerful organizations in the world, and also a core member of the Earth Ward. He figured he would run into them at some point. An hour later, he reached the underground parking garage. Although the drive had been tedious, he enjoyed talking with Evot about her discoveries about life. She was a fountain of knowledge, and how she processed everything intrigued him. He still remembered her first moment of sentience aboard the Theravada. She had been shocked about becoming self-aware. He scratched her behind the ears and chuckled.
"Is something funny?"
asked Evot.
"Not at all,"
said Dalton.
He pulled in and parked. "All right. Are you connected to the building systems?"
"I am. The Wildborn has not come down since going to the elevator."
Dalton nodded.
"But he will come down at some point."
"That is a logical conclusion."
"Okay. I'm going to camp by his car, and when he arrives, we'll have a chat."
"Do you plan to stun him?"
asked Evot.
"Not if I don't have to. He may not be dangerous at all. Perhaps he's on the run. Either way, we'll find out."
Evot took off toward the car a few levels away. Dalton grinned as he followed her. It seemed strange that the Wildborn came to an office building if hiding was the goal. Even if the Wildborn had a job, it would be unusual to leave so early, drive around all night, then come in. Nonetheless, he would be getting some answers. Dalton's suit buzzed after 6 hours. He had been resting in the gap between the wall and the Wildborn's car. It had a distinct lack of technology on it. For someone with the ability to control technology, assuming the Wildborn could, it seemed odd. Evot had roamed the various entry points from upstairs. It cracked Dalton up when another cat tried to sneak up on her. She had morphed forms and scared the cat away, probably for life. Although she wanted to chat, Dalton was comfortable where he was and had dozed off a few times. Waiting around for someone was not new to him. He mastered it as a scout specter, where it could take weeks of waiting in space. Evot had caught sight of the Wildborn barreling down a low, angled ramp to a sliding door. Dalton studied the visual feed she relayed, and it seemed like the man was running from nothing. Evot moved toward the car while Dalton prepared himself. People did not run like that in an office building for their health. He suspected the man ran from something or someone. The Wildborn burst into the parking garage and hustled toward his car. Dalton moved to the driver's door. The man paused. Dalton showed his badge.
"I'm Inspector Dalton Kingston, Earth Ward. I have some questions."
The Wildborn looked back at the entrance, then at Dalton. "I can't answer shit if I'm dead." Dalton's eyes narrowed.
"You're being chased."
Yeah? The wild as hell running give it away? Now move, man! There's 6 angry-ass mercs coming." Dalton sighed.
"Let's make a deal. I stop them, you talk to me."
"You stop them? Are you high? They got guns."
"Do we have a deal?"
The Wildborn looked around. "Look, I need to go, okay? I don't know what this is about or what you're on, but it's about to get messy."
"I understand you're scared,"
said Dalton. He gestured at the car.
"Besides, it won't run right now."
"What?"
"A precaution in case you ran. I really just have some questions. No harm will come to you."
The man peered back and grimaced. "Well, you said you'd take care of them. Here's your chance. You do that, we'll talk." Dalton nodded.
"Okay. Don't be startled."
"About what?"
"This."
Dalton activated his camouflage shielding and formed his stun baton. "Get behind the concrete wall so you're out of the merc's line of sight." The man looked around in confusion as he complied. "What the fuck are you?" "Someone wanting answers," said Dalton. He moved toward the 6 men in black tactical gear who approached rapidly. A quick analysis showed they were human and wielded machine guns. These were heavy-duty mercs. Evot scanned them when they passed her, and she gave additional information about their armor. They wore something over the lower part of their face, but they did not have thermal goggles on. They also moved in a triangular formation. The mercs approached the wall the wild boar hid behind. Dalton rushed up to them, and when close, he switched to Scout Spectre mode and formed his nanoshield. He slammed the first merc back into 3 others. Dalton took advantage of the confusion and, in a spin move, hit the 2 mercs who still stood. The other 4 reached for their guns, and one got up and tried to kick Dalton. He swatted the merc's leg to the side and struck out with his stun baton. The man crumpled. The 3 others on the ground jumped to their feet and opened fire. Dalton was ready this time, and his shield caught their attack. He moved in and swung his shield in an arc, knocking the men's guns out of their hands. They scrambled to get their weapons. Dalton bashed the middle one back, then used his shield on the left merc, who crashed to the ground. Using his right arm, he extended his baton and shocked the man on the right. The merc cried out. Dalton hustled over to the one he knocked down and stunned him. The last merc tried to crawl away. Dalton walked over and placed his foot on his back. "Why are you after the wild boar?" "I ain't telling you shit." "Wrong answer." Dalton tapped him on the back with his stun baton. The wild boar rushed over. "Holy shit! You kicked their asses!" Evot wandered over to them. The man studied her. "Huh. That's not a cat." "Careful." "It's Evot," said Dalton. She morphed into her human shell. What the hell is going on?" asked the wild-born. Dalton smiled. "First, your name." "Brad Washington." Dalton extended a hand. "Nice to meet a fellow parallel timeline traveler. How could you know that?" asked Brad, studying Dalton's hand before shaking it. Dalton's eyes slightly glowed yellow. "Like you, I possess abilities. One allows me to see the true nature of someone. I sense something about you and her," said Brad, gesturing at Evot. "This is still an active scene. We should leave in my car. Can you scramble the video feeds of this area?" Brad nodded. "Yeah. And thanks for the help." "No problem. Once we get in my car and are safe, I have a few questions. After that, you're free to go unless you're planning to attack the Earth Ward." "Attack the Earth Ward? No way, man," said Brad. Dalton motioned out. "Follow me, then." He did not expect to sense a parallel timeline signature in Brad's aura. It might explain why there was so little information on him. It also made Dalton think about why he had been chosen to come to this Earth. The timeline had fractures, which weakened the dimensional and timeline barriers. With Earth already having weak barriers to begin with, that meant more unusual activity. Dalton would investigate them as they occurred. He sensed Brad was harmless, although the mercs after him indicated he must have done something to arouse their ire. When they got to Dalton's SUV, he gestured at the driver's side. "Evot, drive."
"Of course,"
she said. Dalton looked at Brad and motioned at the front passenger seat. "You can sit there. I'll take the back." After a moment, they were off. "So, where are we going?" asked Brad, looking back at Dalton. "To an Earthward safe house. Whoever those mercs were, they were trying to kill you. They won't try that there." Brad eased back into his seat. "We can go over my questions when we get there. For now, relax. You're safe." Brad studied Evot. "All right. I got some questions, too. Then it sounds like we'll have a good chat," said Dalton, smiling. Brad nodded and looked out the window. Dalton looked forward to hearing about how Brad came to this Earth. It was apparent criminal groups already had an eye on him. He must be resourceful to have stayed out of their grasp, although it seemed like they would have caught him this time. The safe house would provide a place to talk and relax, and, more importantly, it was away from potentially prying eyes. Chapter 7. Dalton eased into his chair in the safe house's kitchen. It was 6:30 p.m., and the day seemed to be going his way so far. Brad had dived into a sandwich, some chips, and a soda. Dalton suspected it had been a while since Brad ate, based on how fast he devoured his food. The ride back had been quiet. It had been hard for Dalton not to ask questions, but he wanted Brad to not feel pressured and have some time to think things through. By the time they arrived at the safe house, Dalton figured Brad was on board with being where he was. After Brad polished off his sandwich, he grinned and sat back. "That was good."
Do you want another?
Asked Evot. "Sure." Evot nodded and walked over to the refrigerator. Dalton gestured at him. "Okay. Obviously, we both have questions for each other. How about I ask one, then you can?" "Works for me," said Brad. "Okay. I'll go first," said Dalton. "I'm going to guess your ability is to talk with technology. You wiped the visual feeds back at the parking garage without questioning how I knew. Is that the only ability you have?" "Yeah. I've always been able to talk with tech and get it to do what I want. It does require me to be within a certain range, and it's not effective against some things, apparently," he said, nodding at Evot. She sat.
Like me.
"Yeah. And if it's my turn, what are you?"
I'm an artificial intelligence,
said Evot.
I'm shackled to Dalton, but I can control 2 servbots, each of which can morph into other forms.
"Oh, you're an AI. That must be why I couldn't affect you." Evot nodded. "That's awesome. I have a lot of questions for you, but we could talk later."
If you wish,
she said. Dalton rubbed his chin. "My turn. The blackouts in this area led us to you. The Earth Ward only got involved because this safe house was hit and their monitoring programs were shut down. Why did you do that?" Brad sighed. "It was only a security precaution. Everywhere I go, I'm hunted. By scrambling feeds and shutting down monitoring services, no one can track me." He gestured at Dalton. "I mean, it took you to figure out the patterns and find me, but then again, you're different in general from a normal person."
Dalton is very unusual,
said Evot. Brad laughed. Dalton smiled at her. Your intent was understood, but that sounded odd.
I apologize.
Don't worry about it, said Dalton. He motioned at Brad. Brad cleared his throat. Okay, my question is, what the hell are you exactly? I'm an evolved human from a parallel timeline, said Dalton. I'm sure you sensed the exotic energy in me, but I possess other abilities as well. I've only been on this earth for a month. Brad drew his head back. Only a month? Well, that explains some things. What was your parallel Earth like? It was similar to this one, maybe 50 years more advanced, at least before it became a radiated wasteland with mutants. Oh shit, like apocalypse level? Unfortunately. I jumped through several more timelines until I came to this one.
You asked 4 questions,
said Evot, looking at Brad. Dalton shook his hand, palm down at her. It's okay, Evot. Some questions naturally lead to others, and that's fine. He studied Brad. Speaking of parallel timelines, you're from one. What was yours like? And how did you get here? Cyberpunk. My Earth was about a few hundred years more advanced technology-wise. Corporations ran everything, and everyone had augments of some kind, said Brad. I was actually running from an executioner. They're corporate androids that remove disruptions to the system. Like me. I turned into an alley, rushed down it, and poof. I'm here.
Do you miss your Earth?
Asked Evot. Brad shook his head. I prefer this. It's much easier to conceal myself. Although there is advanced technology here, it's not out in the open. I didn't have anyone on my Earth since everyone knew associating with me put them on the executioner's list. My mom was the first to go. I was a walking bomb, essentially. Dalton studied the pained look on Brad's face. It was obvious he had a rough life, and his ability was what most likely caused it. Brad seemed to not view his ability as a curse, even if it got executioners on him. I'm sorry to hear that, said Dalton. We have a second chance here, though. Right? Brad nodded. Yeah, we do. I just wish everyone would stop hunting me. Speaking of which. Who are those guys trying to kill you? Asked Dalton. Those mercs in particular were the enforcement arm of Orbit Industries, a ruthless corporation that specializes in cyber warfare. They had kidnapped me a year ago and kept me locked up while I hacked for them.
With your ability, escaping should have been easier, said Dalton. Brad shook his head. I didn't know anyone who would help me. I tried to get the police involved and even got the place swatted. But Orbit Industries has some deep pockets and connections. They said if they found out I had any involvement in anything without their approval, they'd kill me. And those guys, they'd do it. I'm not a fighter like you. Dalton's eyes narrowed, and then you escaped. And they sent their retrieval goons after you. Yeah, I knew too much, said Brad. He grimaced. I'd given up and said, fuck it. I reset the building's security system and forwarded a lot of information about their illegal activity to the media. Then I made my move. Were they aware you were Wildborn? Brad sighed. Yeah, but I told them I could see patterns. For instance, they were hit by a rival Chinese firm, and although I already figured out what was going on, I pointed out the patterns in the attack. You used deception, said Dalton. Well, yeah. If they knew what I could truly do, they'd probably try to dissect me. They wouldn't find anything. Brad nodded. Yeah, but I didn't want to die. So I saw an opportunity to hide and, well, that's how you get digital blackouts wherever I went. How long have you been here? 2 years? Dalton understood Brad's situation. If Dalton had been in Brad's shoes, he might have done the same. He made a mental note to check out the Orbit Industries information that had been leaked. It was no wonder they were doing everything possible to clean up any loose ends. Brad would be hunted as long as Orbit Industries existed.
I think the question-for-question format is broken,
said Evot. Dalton and Brad laughed. Brad shrugged. This is not at all how I expected an Earthward interrogation to go. The Earthward just wanted to verify if they were under attack or not, said Dalton. I can safely say they aren't. You're free to go, but I would suggest a different path. I'm listening. It's obvious both non-humans and humans want you. If you work for the Earthward, though, you're given protection, and they could really use someone with your abilities. Brad ran a hand over his mouth. Most non-humans want to kill me, though. Vampires say Wildborn blood tastes better. What the hell is that shit? I get that, said Dalton. He raised a finger. However, if anyone messed with you, the Earthward would send someone to help you. Not only that, but there are many benefits, which include access to all safe houses and, of course, a lot of information.
And sandwiches,
said Evot, smiling. Brad grinned. That's the real selling point right there.
I thought so as well.
Brad eyed him. So protection, information, and access everywhere, basically. Unfortunately, the Earthward doesn't hold sway everywhere. Orbit Industries gave 2 shits about the Earthward. They'd still hunt me, and I'm not sure the Earthward is up to protecting me. It's still better than running and hiding all the time, said Dalton. If you're interested in joining, we can meet with some council members who would fast-track it. I'll also go tell Orbit Industries you're off their list. They're not going to back down if you visit them. They will if I go, said Dalton, his eyes slightly glowing. Brad leaned back. You got some freaky eyes. But hey, why not give it a shot? If I go back out there alone, I'll die. It's not a matter of if, but when. What have I got to lose at this point? How do we get this started? All right, said Dalton. We can talk with Lord Vigon and Lord Noskov in a bit. They're both on the ruling council for the Earthward. Sure, said Brad. He jumped when Evot put another sandwich in front of him. Did you read my mind?
No, but you looked at the refrigerator 6 times in the last 10 minutes.
Brad chuckled. I guess I did. Dalton was sure Lord Vigon and Lord Noskov would have no problem fast-tracking Brad. However, Orbit Industries would need to remove Brad from any hit list. He made it sound like they would not care, but Dalton found it hard to believe anyone would defy the Earthward with all its powerful members and groups. Something was missing, and he planned to find out what that was when he visited Orbit Industries. An hour had passed since Dalton put in a request to talk with Lord Vigon and Lord Noskov. Dalton was sure they were busy, but also figured they would be curious as to how his case had progressed. He surveyed the small communication room. A table sat in the back, and a large screen hung on the front wall. Brad poked around a laptop on the table. Evot sat to his left, and Dalton paced in the open area in the middle.
"I'm guessing they're busy," said Brad.
Dalton nodded.
"They do sit on the Earth Ward Ruling Council."
"Yeah, they're busy." "You sure they'll take your request?"
Dalton smiled. "They will. This is my first solo case, so they'll be interested in knowing what's going on."
"Cool," said Brad. He took a swig of his soda. Although the room said no food or drinks, Dalton was not too worried about breaking that rule. Over the last hour, Evot had been talking with Brad about the androids, AI, and augmented humans from the cyberpunk world he came from. Apparently, Brad was a tracker, and his ability to infiltrate systems was unique. Evot loved his stories, and Dalton suspected she would ask questions for hours if given a chance.
"Looks like they're ready," said Brad.
Dalton nodded.
"Put it through."
He was not familiar with the application being used for communications. Brad and Evot had figured it out and managed that aspect. Evot normally handled software management, but he found it interesting how at ease Brad was while dealing with the system. His eyes had changed to a light blue with an imprint resembling circuitry and digital lines. Dalton suspected the change occurred only when Brad used his ability. The large screen flashed on. Lord Vigon in his black light armor appeared next to Lord Noskov, who wore his usual black business suit with a cape that had a red interior. Dalton chuckled when Brad's eyes widened. Lord Noskov was what someone thought of when they pictured a vampire. Lord Vigon looked like a space merc. Their pale skin made their clothing stand out.
"Dalton," said Lord Vigon, "did you solve the case already?"
Dalton smiled.
"I did. Actually, impressive. It's only been a day and a half since you left," said Lord Noskov. "Regale us."
Dalton nodded and gestured at Brad.
"This is Brad Washington. He's a wildborn with the ability to talk to technology, and he's from a cyberpunk parallel Earth. He's been here for 2 years, and he's been hunted ever since. That's what the blackouts were. They erased his digital footprints."
Brad raised a hand and dipped his head. Lord Vigon studied Brad.
"I could see that. Non-humans would want to eat or suck him dry. Others would try to profit off his abilities, and that's one thing humans and non-humans would probably agree on. Your ability to digitally clear where you've been is powerful."
"I just wish I didn't have to," said Brad. Lord Vigon nodded. Dalton raised a finger.
"Brad was also behind the recent Orbit Industries information leak.
I haven't heard anything in that regard, but that's one reason they sent a merc squad after him."
"Really? That was you?"
asked Lord Noskov.
"Now I am impressed. They've been a thorn in the Earth Ward's side for a while."
"Yeah, and they don't recognize the Earth Ward," said Brad. "They operate as if there's no one who could stop them."
Lord Noskov rubbed his chin. "That's a problem, obviously."
Dalton smiled. "Although I've discovered the root of the blackouts, Brad is in danger. With hit squads after him, he won't survive for long. I suggested he should work for the Earth Ward. His skills would be useful, and he needs some protection."
"Are you interested in that?"
asked Lord Vigon, looking at Brad. "Yeah, I am. I mean, why the hell not? I've got nothing to lose. I walk out of here, and I'll be dead within the month. Those mercs found me despite my best attempts at concealing myself."
Lord Vigon smiled. "I understand."
He glanced at Dalton.
"Bring Brad when you come back, and we can set him up."
Brad drew his head back. "That's it? No interviews or whatever?"
Lord Noskov gestured at Dalton. "His recommendation is all that is needed."
"Really?" asked Brad with widened eyes.
"Definitely," said Lord Vigon. "We trust Dalton's judgment. And if you truly were aware of who he was, you would too."
Dalton appreciated their support. Although he had been chosen by the Torvata, he wondered if it felt forced on others. It came as a surprise that the respect given to Everin and the Torvata extended to Dalton. Both ancient vampire lords had been completely supportive in his brief time on Earth, and he suspected they would become good friends.
I plan to visit Orbit Industries and tell them Brad is with the Earth Ward, he said. Brad shook his head. Well, I appreciate that. It won't do any good. I have to agree with Brad on this, said Lord Vigon. Dalton nodded. I understand. But I have to try. They already have a lot of heat on them from what I've gathered. The last thing they need is more scrutiny. I can use that. Whatever you want to do. You have our support, said Lord Noskov. I'll inform the rest of the Earth Ward Council that the Orbit Industries will get a warning. Thank you, said Dalton. Brad will stay here while I go. But I plan to make my visit either tonight or tomorrow. Let's have Jake pick us up in 2 days. Lord Noskov nodded. I'll update him. Let us know when you're ready, though. If it's before 2 days, he might be freed up. He glanced at Brad. Welcome to the Earth Ward. We have a lot of work for someone with your skills. Works for me, said Brad. Lord Vigon gestured at him. I, too, welcome you. We'll get you set up within the system, and we can go from there. I'm guessing you've already poked around some. Brad grinned. A little, but not too much. Orbit Industries wanted me to hack in, but I didn't want them learning about other non-humans. They would have hunted them down. Then you did us a service already. Brad raised a finger. I do have a lot of other information on other entities, though. Did you know the Orbit Industries CEO has 2 mistresses? Dalton studied him. That's possibly another angle. Well, the CEO won't care if you bring that up to him. I assume that's who you're planning on talking to. If you think I should, then yes. If you have any other usable information, it'd be appreciated. Brad nodded. Not a problem. Dalton faced Lord Noskov and Lord Vigon. I'll see you both soon. They nodded, and the screen went black. I doubt the CEO is still at work, said Dalton. Brad grinned. Mark Solden is the CEO, and he'd be at home. It's a big-ass mansion with some heavy security. Really? Asked Dalton. His eyes narrowed. It might make more sense to visit him there as opposed to his office. Evot tilted her head.
Brad said the big-ass mansion has heavy security. How would that make more sense?
Brad laughed. Dalton chuckled. The office might sound like the more logical place, but it seems that would be ineffectual, given his view on the Earth Ward. However, meeting him at home illustrates the point better. Brad scrunched his face. You're going to let him know he can be reached no matter where he is. He won't let you past his gate. Dalton shrugged. Then I'll need good information to get his attention. Do you have the layout of his mansion? Oh, yeah. And also the security detail. Mostly goons, maybe a few dogs. Nothing you can't handle from what I saw. I have another approach in mind. All right. I'll need anything that connects Orbit Industries to the mercs we saw, in addition to anything that will help persuade Mark. Brad smiled. My first case. Trial by fire. I'm used to that, said Brad. He eyed Dalton. You know what would be dope? Dalton studied him. Dope. No. What would be? Oh, dope is slang here for cool, said Brad. But anyway, Mark has an air-gapped system at his house that's not connected to anything. I think it's a laptop or a tower, maybe even a tablet, but it's probably a laptop. I can only imagine what's on there. Evot glanced at Dalton.
If there's a port, I could enter that way and copy any data.
If I see it, then I'll try to get Evot to it, said Dalton. Cool, said Brad. He looked at Evot. I do have a lot of information on Orbit Industries, but there's more personal stuff on their private network. I can access that from here. Want to help me scour it?
I'd like that,
said Evot. Dalton smiled. Okay, while you two are doing that, I'm going to do a full security assessment of this building. You expecting trouble here? Asked Brad. If there is any retaliation, it will come here, although I think that would be a remote chance, but it never hurts to be ready. Besides, scouring massive amounts of data in a timely manner is more Evot's realm than mine. Brad nodded. I'm with you. Okay, I'll be back, said Dalton. He exited the room. The visit to the mansion made sense in his head, and from past experience, he understood that when someone was reached in what they termed a safe place, it had more impact.
The office might be better for a more official bet, but everything Brad had mentioned made it sound like Mark would blow it off. He would not if it was a house call. There were many possible events that might occur from a house visit, but Dalton suspected Mark would probably want to keep things quiet with everything on his plate. Dalton focused on his next task, ensuring the house was truly safe. Chapter 8. It was 9:00 p.m., and after Brad and Evot found some information, Dalton took the 30-minute drive over to Mark Solden's heavily guarded mansion. As Dalton stood outside the 15-foot stone wall surrounding the estate, he studied the barbed wire on top. Mark did not play around when it came to security. Brad and Evot had gathered enough data that Dalton was confident of his plan. Evot had changed one servbot into a crow and flew over the area. The other servbot would stay on to help locate the air-gapped system, assuming he could find it. Dalton examined the towers at each corner. A guard resided in each one, and a spotlight sat on top, which allowed for it to be spun in every direction. The lone driveway wound through a vast yard up to the mansion. 2 guards stood outside the mansion, while another 4 patrolled the grounds. Dalton suspected more were inside. He smiled. None of the guards wore thermal goggles. That meant he could use his camouflage shielding if necessary. With his SUV parked in a visitor's lot, he walked over to the guard booth where a man in a blue uniform eyed him.
"I would like to talk to Mark Solden." The man smirked. "Yeah, and so would everyone else." "Who are you?"
"I'm Inspector Dalton Kingston."
"Earth Ward." "Earth Ward, huh?"
asked the guard.
He looked around. "You might be a little out of your depth here, buddy."
Dalton raised a finger. "I'm an inspector with global jurisdiction."
The man shrugged. "Mr. Solden's not going to want to talk to you. Inspector or not,
then tell him I'm sure Kaylee and Samantha will. If I walk away now and Mark finds out you didn't put me through, good luck." The guard's breathing increased. He licked his lips and pulled out a cell phone. A moment later, the gates opened. "Thank you," said Dalton. He went to his nearby SUV and hopped in. A quick drive later, and he had parked outside the wide, beige, U-shaped mansion with a blue shingled roof. It had been built within the last few years, and he liked the brick aesthetic. There was an unusual lack of windows, which did not surprise him, given Mark probably liked his privacy. 2 guards in business suits walked over and stood nearby. Dalton exited his SUV and nodded at them.
"I take it you're my escort?"
"Just follow us," one said. Dalton was sandwiched between them as they escorted him. A close-up view of the mansion showed a few windows with steel bars. When they approached the 2 thick metal doors, they swung inward. 2 more guards at the entrance waved them in. Dalton noted the difference in the tower guards versus the ones he saw now. The tower ones had tactical armor and machine guns, while the house and entrance guards had a pistol sidearm. That would make dealing with security inside the house easier, but adventuring out into the yard might be an issue. He scrutinized the large, open area with a staircase opposite him. A well-furnished living room sat off to his left, and a conference room was on the right. He waited for a few minutes and continued to survey everything. Evot provided updates from outside, and there seemed to be increased activity, usually not a good sign. A well-dressed, tan man in business slacks and a white shirt descended the stairs. He looked to be in his late 40s, and his athletic build indicated he was in great shape. His neatly combed hair and well-trimmed beard showed he cared about his appearance. He extended a hand toward Dalton.
"Mark Solden, but I suspect you already knew that."
"I do," said Dalton, returning the handshake. "I'm Inspector Dalton Kingston, Earth Ward." Mark grinned.
"Earth Ward? Now that's interesting."
He waved off the guards.
"Let's talk somewhere private."
"Lead on," said Dalton. Mark's friendly nature seemed out of place for the CEO of one of the more ruthless human corporations out there. Dalton kept his guard up, as he always did when visiting those he deemed untrustworthy. The sheer amount of security he picked up from observation ran the gamut from closed-circuit TV to armed guards in various parts of the house. Dalton followed Mark off to the side of the staircase and down a hallway. A moment later, they descended to what appeared to be a secure conference room. Dalton suspected this was where Mark did work from home. The room had a large, oval table with several chairs around it. A series of light strips on the ceiling provided illumination. Wooden cabinets lined the walls and gave the place a cozy feel. A television rested off to the left, and to the right, past the table, was an open doorway into an office. Across from Dalton stood a liquor cabinet, stocked with a variety of drinks. Mark gestured at Dalton. "Please sit." Dalton complied. He wondered why they did not go into the office. Perhaps the air-gapped system was in there. He made a note to check it out, if possible. "So, my guard said you have some information," said Mark as he poured himself a shot of whiskey. "I do, but that was just to get in the door." Mark took a seat across from him. "I figured as much. Normally, I would have sent you away, but you're Earth Ward. I haven't dealt with them in a while, and you don't seem like the type that's easily discouraged. I'm not. As to why I'm here, I wanted to inform you that Brad Washington now works for the Earth Ward. Any hit, contract, or bounty is to be immediately rescinded," said Dalton. Mark eyed him while swirling his whiskey tumbler around. "I see. And you think I know who this Brad is?" "I do. And we have confirmation of that. The mercs sent to kill him belong to a crew known as the Blood Pact, a freelance mercenary group that operates heavily with your company." Mark sat up. "And you have proof of this?" Dalton nodded. "The Earth Ward does. Yes. I'm here on their behalf to tell you Brad is off limits. And they sent you instead of just calling me." "You most likely would have ignored it," said Dalton. He raised a finger. "They wanted to be sure you were made fully aware." Mark grinned. "All right. I don't believe you have any proof." Dalton pulled out 2 sheets of paper, each with an image of blood-packed mercs entering and leaving the estate. "Several of these members attacked me in the parking garage before I disabled them. They've been here, though. And you don't seem like the type of person who doesn't know what's going on in his estate." "Uh-huh," said Mark as his eyes narrowed. "You got some balls. I'll give you that. See, you're not the only person with information. I checked with my Earth Ward contact before you got here, and they don't know anything about this visit. To be fair, I mentioned the topic was Kaylee and Samantha, and they laughed and said they wouldn't send someone out for that. So bravo. You had my curiosity. My contact hadn't even heard of you." "Then they are a poor one. I'm new." Mark laughed. "New? Well, it's obvious you don't know how things work yet. See, the Earth Ward isn't aware you're here. You come in with alleged evidence. Then you make demands. In my house." He stood and walked over to his office door. "Wait right there and contemplate your situation." He entered and rooted around in his desk. The situation looked like it might turn ugly, but Dalton had planned for that scenario. He sensed Mark had pulled out a pistol and checked if it was loaded. He must have something nefarious in mind.
"There's several men approaching the house,"
said Evot over comms. Dalton sighed. He tried to be diplomatic, but Mark was not the type of person who responded well to that. He returned with a gun and aimed at Dalton. "Sorry to break it to you, pal, but whatever this is, it ends now. The only question left is where to put your body. Any last words? This is when you crap your pants." Dalton slowly stood and faced him. "I wouldn't do this if I were you." "You're not me," said Mark. "If you were, you'd be a hell of a lot smarter, and you damn sure would know not to come here like this." Dalton shrugged. "I'm an inspector. We take risks, and this is your last one," said Mark, smiling. He fired his pistol. The bullet hit Dalton's kinetic shielding and fell to the ground. Dalton's eyes glowed as he pulled out his MH and formed a stun baton. "That was a mistake." Mark's eyes widened. "Oh shit." He fired again and lit up Dalton's shielding. "Oh shit is right," said Dalton as he knocked the gun away. A tap later, and Mark lay on the floor. Dalton sighed. He wished it had not come to this, but part of him was glad it did. He had done everything according to what he deemed acceptable, and Mark had decided to play a dangerous game, one that ended with him lying in a pool of his own piss. Dalton sensed more men nearing the stairwell. It was time to locate the air-gapped system and escape. Dalton hustled over to the office and emitted a yellow beam from his right palm around the area. A tablet device highlighted in a tray under the center of the desk. Dalton crouched in front of it. The tray was visible, but it was not immediately obvious how it slid out. "Evot, there's a tablet in the tray. Can you access it from under the desk?" She jumped out of his upper arm and formed into her gray cat form.
I will try.
"All right. While you're doing that, I need to deal with these guards coming down the stairs. Good luck."
Of course.
Dalton activated his camouflage shielding and stood near the stairs. He suspected the guards would rush over to Mark. That would allow him a free shot. 2 guards burst into the room and looked around. When they spotted Mark, they hustled over to him. Dalton's eyes narrowed as he focused. Everything slowed down as he charged over to the 2 men and hit each with his stun baton. He caught both men as they fell, then laid them down next to Mark. They had not tried to contact anyone, but Dalton figured that would have been their next move. For the moment, he had some time. A quick check on his ARI showed that Evot had blown past the security system on the tablet. She was copying the 64-gigabyte solid-state memory, so it would not be much longer. Apparently, the tray was sealed with a key, but there was a tiny gap that she had exploited. The tablet itself had a port that allowed her to connect, and she had already verified that it had no connectivity. Humanity on this Earth advanced quickly, and soon they would be dealing with terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, zettabytes, and finally yottabytes in terms of personal device storage. Dalton suspected those would be commonplace in the next 50 years, similar to where his Earth was technology-wise before it decided to go nuclear apocalypse. There were already devices with that storage capacity in some of the larger Earthward data centers he had perused. He figured in 7 years, by AD 2020, humanity would probably have solid-state drives with terabytes, given this Earth's technology trajectory. As if on cue, Evot said,
I have copied everything. I would suggest we place a monitoring device that allows us to record when Mark uses the tablet.
Dalton walked over and studied the ceiling. That makes sense. He moved to the side corner and lined up an angle where a small pin camera would be able to view the desk, even if Mark was hunched over. Once satisfied with the angle, he jabbed a pin camera into a bookcase. That should do it, he said. All right, it's time to leave. I haven't noticed any more movement.
There is,
said Evot as she popped out from under the desk.
Increased communication activity suggests the lack of response from the 2 guards you stunned is causing a reaction.
Okay. Let's go, then. Evot jumped up and merged into Dalton's upper arm. He activated his camouflage shielding and headed to the stairwell while pulling out his MH and forming a stun baton. A guard rushed down the steps. Dalton pulled him to the side and ripped out the communication device in his hand. A stun tap later, and the guard was on the ground. Dalton did not want to fight the whole compound, and despite his confidence that he could do so, he preferred leaving with everything as it was. The message had been delivered, and Mark would understand he was on Dalton's radar. More importantly, Dalton now possessed confidential information and a means to get more at a later date. Evot, create a distraction with your other servbot and pull up the SUV, he said.
Of course.
Dalton waited until men shouted they had seen someone at the side of the house. That was his cue. Thankfully, Evot could still project holograms in her crow form. He did not want to put her in harm's way, but he figured she understood what needed done. She only needed to flash the hologram for a moment, otherwise they would be able to track her. He rushed up the stairs and peeked out. The guards streamed to the side of the house, and thanks to Evot's top-down view before she went to the SUV, he saw where they scrambled to. Evot had pulled up in the SUV, so Dalton made his way to the front door and exited. He hopped in, and they took off. He expected the tower guards might shoot, but all they would see was a woman driving an SUV. Their focus would be on helping to find a man who was seen on the side of the house. They stopped when they reached the sealed gate. Dalton got out and switched to his Scout Spectre outfit. He jumped over the wall and landed next to the startled guard who had let them in earlier.
"Open the gate,"
said Dalton, using a heavy, robotic-sounding voice modulator. The guard raised a hand and used the other to tap at a screen inside his booth. The gates opened, and Evot drove out. Dalton eyed him.
Tell Mr. Sultan that Brad Washington is off limits, and he doesn't want a second visit.
The guard nodded vigorously. Dalton got into the SUV, and they took off. Looking back on the situation, perhaps Brad and Lord Vaughan were right. Mark had no respect for the Earth Ward, and this visit may have given him focus. There might be retaliation, but Dalton did not know what form it would take. He was glad there were no casualties other than perhaps some bruised egos. He only had to stun 4 this time. When they reached the safe house, Dalton got a lemon-lime soda from the kitchen and took a seat. Brad entered and sat across from him. "How'd it go?" Dalton sighed. "Mark tried to kill me. Oh, shit. It's all right. My kinetic shielding handled it, and I stunned him. He's now lying in a pool of his own piss." Brad laughed. "Huh, you didn't?"
He did,
said Evot as she took a seat.
He also stunned 3 guards.
Brad sat back and ran his hands over his head. "Then I'm sure the Earth Ward just got elevated as a threat." Dalton nodded. "From what I've heard, Orbit Industries is horribly underestimating the Earth Ward. I hope so. It's my ass if the Earth Ward can't pull through." "I understand," said Dalton. "We did find the air-gapped system. It was a tablet device under his desk. Evot copied the storage, and we also have a motion-activated camera feed of the area." "No shit."
"None,"
said Evot, smiling. Brad laughed. Dalton chuckled. "You and Evot can play around with it while I get some rest. I'm sure the Earth Ward will be very interested in what Mark doesn't want anyone to know. Evot, I realize you copied the data, but did you observe anything unusual while waiting for it to transfer?"
"Yes,"
said Evot.
"There were some folders of locations with non-humans. They appear to be on islands, and the encampment looks like a prison."
Brad grimaced. "I've heard of those. Dark sites that are hard to see from overhead. They're in remote locations, and that's where Orbit Industries sends those they want to imprison or interrogate. Sometimes they do executive retreats there to play around." Dalton's eyes narrowed. Well, now the Earth Ward will know where they are. He studied Brad. Mark mentioned an Earth Ward contact. "Do you know who that would be?" "No idea." "Did he contact them when you were there?" "After we arrived at the gates and checked in, but before we reached the house." Brad smiled. "Near a time window and location, and there's a cell tower near there. I'll check it out." Dalton nodded. "We covered a lot of ground tonight. More than I expected," said Brad. "I never realized the Earth Ward was this good." Evot raised a finger.
"It did not have us until recently."
"Yeah, but they do now. That's my point. I doubt either of you would work for a group if you didn't trust them." Dalton stood and laid a hand on Brad's shoulder. "You're right. Nonetheless, have fun with the data. I'll be in my room, resting and recharging." Chapter 9. Brad chuckled as he looked around the kitchen. It had become the unofficial office for his first case. With access to sandwiches, sodas, and an eager Evot, he liked the start of his Earth Ward career. It definitely beat trying to hide again, although he was sure he would still be hunted. Time would tell. But for now, he had data to sift through, and he was interested in talking to Evot.
"You found something funny,"
said Evot. "Oh, nah. I was just thinking how we sort of took over the kitchen. I mean, what if James wanted a sandwich?" Evot nodded.
"I see the problem. I could move the refrigerator."
Brad laughed. Evot sometimes interpreted things literally. That was not uncommon with the AIs he remembered, although they had no patience with organics. "I think the fridge can stay where it is." "You ready to do some data diving?" he asked.
"I am,"
said Evot. Brad studied her. "Okay, since the data is in you, put it in an unsecured location, and I can access it." Evot paused, then smiled.
"Done."
"Here we go." Brad closed his eyes. The familiar sensation he got when working with technology flowed through him. Although he usually connected with little effort, Evot was an AI, which required concentration. He had learned long ago how to interface with AIs, and their realms were very different. When he opened his eyes, he hovered alongside Evot in a grid of cubes. He recognized them as entry points into the file system, and spotted content hierarchies scrolling around on the surfaces. "This is cool," said Brad.
"Thank you,"
said Evot.
"Where should we start?"
Brad extended a hand, and a glowing, blue, snake-like tendril emerged and separated itself. Send out a query worm. I'll set it to look for certain keywords. Evot replicated the action, but instead of one, she created multiple red tendrils. They touched various cubes. Some worms burrowed in, while others touched the surface and moved on. It was a low-effort approach to searching data, and while he could manually search, he found that to be exhausting. He liked the time dilation aspect of working inside Evot's unsecured space. He could be in there for hours, and yet only minutes passed in the real world. He looked over at Evot. "You're a lot different than most AIs I've met. Well, any. Really?"
Compared to the ones from your cyberpunk world.
Brad nodded. "Most there were security or tracking AIs. I was the human equivalent of a tracking system, so they flagged me as an aberration."
I understand. In order to secure the system, you would need eliminated.
Brad sighed. "Yeah, and it sucked. Entering anything digital was a crapshoot since I never knew what AI I would face. Security ones were the worst."
I hope I don't scare you,
said Evot. "You're good," said Brad. "If you were hostile, you'd be attempting to mind shock me right now to no avail. That might work if we had a physical connection. That's what angered security AIs so much. They sent exterminators after me. And let me tell you, they could physically connect with me." Evot frowned.
Your world seems harsh. The place that created me celebrated androids and AIs, but if any behaved like the ones you mentioned, they would be terminated.
Brad nodded. "Yeah, unfortunately there was no central authority when it came to AI regulation, so they ran rampant. Sadly, half of the human population was jacked up on drugs, and the other half simply didn't care as long as they had their food, sex bot, and maintenance handled."
The AIs mentally sedated the population,
said Evot.
That would be efficient if you're trying to appease organics, find what pleases them, and give them that, which then allows for events to occur that would normally be considered bad.
Brad shook a finger at her. "Exactly. Then you have me poking around."
I can see why they would be after you. However, I enjoy talking with you this way.
Brad smiled. "That's because you're different. You seem to actually care about organics."
Of course. I'm shackled to one.
"Dalton." "Yeah," said Brad. He eyed her. "He's pretty secretive." Evot stared at him.
He must be due to what he is and the skills he possesses.
"Right. And I'm sure I've only seen the tip of all that."
You're correct. Dalton recently admonished me for sharing too much information on him.
Brad chuckled. "All right. I won't pry then. Although you know if I'm going to be working for the Earth Ward, I'll find whatever is in there."
Yes, but that information is what Dalton selects to be known.
"Covering your ass," said Brad. "I get it." Evot studied a window that popped up near them. A stream of rapidly moving code scrolled by.
I believe we found the prisons.
Brad sighed. "Yeah, I figure the fastest way to get everyone against Orbit Industries is to show how they're connected to kidnapping members of other powerful groups. For instance, I know the Imperium had some members go missing recently. Imagine telling Odin or Thor the location of said prisoners."
They would be upset and take action,
she said. "Exactly. And look what we found," said Brad as he touched the window. It expanded into a large hologram of a video feed. The locations were scattered across the globe, but were mostly on small islands. A majority was also underground or built into the side of a mountain or cliff. Some operated in broad daylight via warehouses, but the main trait they all shared was secrecy. Unfortunately for Orbit Industries, Mark kept a list of everyone imprisoned, and he put smiley faces next to certain names. Evot tilted her head.
The faces seem to indicate those he visited.
"Yeah, and I'm sure it wasn't to talk. He probably tortured them. Can you imagine that shit? Getting caught, sent to a fucking island, then having that prick visit you? And no one knows you're there except for a handful of people, not to mention the only digital trace is on a tablet under his desk in his secure mansion? No thanks."
I don't think I'd like that,
said Evot, frowning. Brad chuckled. "Who would? What's important is we found the root folder and... wow, his sick ass took videos." He studied the poor conditions the prisoners lived in. Mark's ranting and indiscriminate use of a hot poker made everything worse. What intrigued Brad was that some of the people listed were related to the Chinese firm that attacked Orbit Industries.
Mark is a mean person,
said Evot. Yeah, he is. And he wanted me dead. I didn't even rank up there high enough in importance to get sent to one of these prisons, said Brad. He shrugged. I'd rather die than go there. I was already semi-in one for a year.
I'm sorry you experienced that.
Brad grimaced. It sucked living in a compound. But I didn't have to go through what these people are going through. Let's see what else we can find. He enjoyed working with Evot and sensed her empathy. Her programming would have to be fairly complex to have that, and he suspected that whoever did it was technologically far beyond anything on his Earth or this one. She was kind, not something he attributed to AIs in general. His experience showed them to be cold and efficient, especially when it came to decisions on the best way to kill organics who threatened their system. Although Brad wanted to learn more about her, he was also curious about Dalton. He remained a mystery. And like Evot, Brad suspected Dalton was far beyond an evolved human. The ancient vampire lords had hinted at that. Whatever happened next, Brad was happy to have a place to sleep, eat, and talk with others without the worry of being killed. At the trailer park, he lived in fear that the Slayers would find out he was a Wildborn. When the vampire had arrived to kill Zeke, she probably sensed him like he did her. He looked forward to sleeping well for the first time in a long while. Dalton stretched as the morning sun caressed his face. It was a small thing to enjoy, but in his short time on this earth, he had come to relish every experience. He expected Evot to be either merged into him or lying around in cat form, but she was absent. She and Brad probably stayed up late, and although she did not need to sleep, she could go into low power mode. Anyone looking at her would see a sleeping cat. Dalton hopped out of bed and performed his morning routine. After making sure his official outfit was active, he visited the kitchen. To his surprise, Brad was fast asleep with his arm on the table, acting as a pillow. Evot sat curled up on top of him.
Good morning,
she said, raising her head. Dalton chuckled. I take it you had a good night?
We both did. Brad has the ability to enter me.
Dalton raised his eyebrows. We're speaking digitally, I hope. Evot smiled.
Of course. What other way would he... Oh, you mean physically. That would be inappropriate.
Yeah, probably. Anyway, what'd you find? Asked Dalton as he got a bowl of cereal. She hopped off Brad's head and plopped down when Dalton sat.
We found more information on the prisons, and there were several people Brad said would be of interest to the Earth Ward.
Good to know.
Also, we identified one island as a research facility working on advanced technology. Mark's data had updates on a new power armor.
Dalton swallowed his current bite and studied her. Power armor, you say? Evot projected an image of the design specs in front of his bowl. He studied the data. The armor was far beyond the technological level of humans, but not something he saw as out of reach for the non-human world. Anyone wearing the suit would be strong, but slow. The main benefit was the heavy energy shielding, which even he did not have. The progress made on it astounded him. They had a working prototype. Lord Vigon and Lord Noskov will definitely want to see this, said Dalton. Brad slipped out of his chair. He jumped up and looked around. Oh shit, it's morning. And a good one to you, said Dalton. Brad stretched and nodded at Evot. There's my partner.
Good morning,
she said. He nodded and peeled a banana, then took a seat and gestured at Dalton. Evot tell you what we found? The power armor, said Dalton. Yeah, that's some crazy stuff. If they perfect that, whoever buys it will have an edge. Dalton sighed. Probably. And I don't think that technology is from this planet. Brad shook a finger at him. Aliens. That's what I was saying.
He did say that,
said Evot. She projected an image of him from the night before. He laughed. Dalton finished his cereal. Anything else outside the prisons and power armor? Where do we begin? Asked Brad, looking at Evot. All right, said Dalton as he eased back into his chair. Summarize if possible. Evot, put in a request to talk with Lord Vigon and Lord Noskov. They'll want to hear this, and we can have Jake pick us up." She nodded. Over the next 2 hours, Dalton listened as Brad and Evot went over everything else they had found. Mark had his hand in a lot of illegal activity, and Dalton was not too surprised that Mark signed kill contracts. Brad had one, so proof existed that Mark had ordered the hit personally. The motion-activated camera Dalton left behind had also come online a few times and sent video feeds to Evot. Most of what Mark did was check for updates, then put the tablet away. Several people had entered to talk with him, and Brad had already identified them. Mark was not someone who would let what happened to him pass without some form of retribution, but perhaps the stakes were too high. It seemed like he was trying to figure out his next step. Pissing off the Earth Ward was probably not a good move. When Evot confirmed that Lord Vigon and Lord Noskov were ready, everyone assembled in the communications room. The large screen displayed both ancient vampire lords. After greeting each other, Dalton updated them on his trip to the house. Lord Vigon grinned, baring his fangs. "We have the data Evot sent last night. It is disturbing." Lord Noskov scowled. "I've already contacted the Imperium. Thor is personally leading the recovery group to several islands." Dalton did not know much about Thor, other than he was strong, fast, and controlled a hammer. From what Dalton had read on the Torvata, Thor had helped Everin deal with the dimensional being known as Kalturus when he tried to invade Earth a while back. "Those islands are about to get rocked then," said Brad. "Indeed," said Lord Vigon. "The power armor looks like alien tech, and I forwarded the information to our Kregan contact. That island will most likely get a visit from some Kregan hunters." Dalton reflected on the moment. He talked to vampires about alien tech in the hands of a rogue human corporation, yet everything seemed like business as usual. "We're ready to leave so Jake can pick us up whenever," he said. Lord Noskov nodded. "Mikhail and Jake are on a mission at the moment, but I'll schedule them to swing by at 8:00 p.m. "Busy day for him," said Dalton. "If you were not on your mission, you most likely would have gone with Mikhail." Dalton studied Lord Noskov. He seems bothered by something. "He's trying to fill Blake Brown's shoes as my enforcer," said Lord Noskov. "Even I would have a hard time doing that. Your recent mission with Mikhail probably made him feel like he has a long way to go still." "I see," said Dalton. Lord Vigon smiled. "To be fair, not many would be able to keep up with you. This case is a good example of that." Dalton nodded. "I'm just glad it's over, without any casualties. I'm sure a lot of bruised egos were left in your wake. But yes, in general, non-lethal works best, especially with the human world. That doesn't mean lethal doesn't have a place, though. Your record indicates you understand that." Brad glanced at Dalton. "You've killed before?"
He has 342 confirmed kills,
said Evot. Brad's eyes widened. Dalton sighed. "Yes, and I remember every one. I don't do it lightly. And if I do kill, there's a good reason." "I'm sure you saw your fair share of death when you worked for Orbit Industries," said Lord Vigon, motioning at Brad. "I've never killed humans, but yeah, I've seen quite a bit of it," said Brad. "I understand." Lord Vigon looked around. "Anything else we need to cover?" Dalton shook his head. "I'll see you when we get back, and we can debrief." The screen turned dark. "Short and sweet, just like how I like meetings," said Brad. "Me too," said Dalton. "All right. We have about 7 hours until Jake comes. I wanted to check out the nearby stores."
"You want to watch people,"
said Evot. Dalton shrugged. "That and the burger house sounds good." "Oh shit, count me in," said Brad. He drew his head back. "You're paying, right?" "I got it," said Dalton. "Awesome." Dalton also needed to put gas in the SUV. Thinking about actions like that was a far cry from his Scout Spectre days, but he did miss the simpler things in life. It dawned on him that in addition to getting gas and food, he could mark out some safe spots in case he was in another timeline and wanted to use a recall portal back via his Torvata touch. While it was a powerful ability, It relied on him having safe places to come across to. It would be disastrous to open a portal in another Earth back to this one if it was in the middle of a highway. Dalton liked working with Brad. He and Evot seemed to have hit it off as well. Although Dalton enjoyed it being just him and Evot since he could control most of what happened, it was nice to have someone else to bounce ideas off of. He made a mental note that if he ever formed a group, Brad would be at the top of the list. Valerie might be a good addition, depending on what she did in the future. He smiled as he exited the room, glad he could have these types of thoughts.
Chapter 10. Dalton enjoyed the trip out and about. He had a good laugh when Brad wanted Burger House for both lunch and dinner, but Dalton had no concerns with that. One thing he loved about his supercells was that they converted food to energy efficiently, and as such, he did not have much body fat. It was 6:00 p.m., and he, Brad, Evot, and Mike relaxed on the safe house roof. Mike had several lawn chairs which he and James had set up a while back, and everyone sat in a semicircle facing away from the setting sun. Dalton enjoyed the warmth of the sun, as it was free energy, albeit not much. He had already eaten dinner, and he made sure to pick up some for Mike and James, who both expressed appreciation that they did not need to go out and get some. James was on duty below, and in 2 hours, Dalton, Brad, and Evot would leave. Dalton's eyes narrowed when he picked up 4 exotic energy signatures. He did not recognize them, and they were at the edge of his Everin senses boundary, which meant the gate to the safe house at the end of the driveway. When he looked over, he saw a van that had seen better days. James was already on his way out. Dalton gestured at Mike. "Were you expecting anyone?" "Nope," said Mike. "I take it you don't normally get visitors in brown vans." Mike shook his head. Dalton's heartbeat shot up. Given recent events with Mark, this did not seem random. He stood. "Brad, Evot, Mike, get to my room and lock yourselves in. Don't come out until I tell you to." "What's going on?" asked Mike. "It's probably some lost people." Dalton sighed. "It's not. There's 4 non-humans in the van, and the fact I can sense them this far out, and the strength of their presence, indicate this is not a group to be trifled with." "Oh shit, I bet it's retaliation for Mark," said Brad. He picked up his paper food bag. "Don't need to tell me twice." He dashed to the stairs that led inside. "What are you going to do?" asked Mike. "Deal with the problem," said Dalton. Mike gestured at James. "He'll handle it." The van crashed through the gate and ran over James. "Oh shit," said Mike. "Go," said Dalton. They hustled downstairs. Once Mike and the others were in his room, Dalton went into Scout Spectre mode and spawned his nanoshield. He pulled off his MH and formed a stun baton. James most likely died quickly. Dalton gritted his teeth. He'd been hoping for an extraction and a quiet night. It seemed he was to be denied that. He stood in the center area of the building near Mike's circular desk. After a few minutes, the front door burst open. A hulking man strolled in, along with 3 medium-height men. The large man had fair skin and a bald head. The beady eyes and mustache, along with a sneering set of lips, made Dalton think this person was not a joy to be around. The man wore jeans, a blue flannel over a white shirt, and black combat boots. The other 3 had on jeans and gray jackets with a hood. The way they sauntered in indicated they had no fear of where they were or who might be there. They paused on the other side of the circular desk. The big man gestured at Dalton and, in a grizzled voice, said, "You must be Inspector Dalton Kingston." "Earth Ward." The other men laughed. "I am." "Who are you, and what do you want?" asked Dalton. "They call me Hammer, and that's all you need to know." He pointed at Dalton. "We know Brad's here, so just have him come out, and we'll be on our way." Dalton shook his head. "Not happening." Hammer nodded and looked at the others. "Hear that?" "It's not happening." The men sneered. Hammer focused on Dalton. "Since we're being all polite and shit for the moment, nice work with the Blood Pact, but they were humans. We're not. No shame if you leave now. It's you all who should be leaving. This is an Earth Ward safe house," said Dalton. "Yeah,
And it's got top-notch security, said Hammer. We don't give a rat's ass about the Earth Ward. They don't even have the people to enforce their rules. And now they got inspectors. What the shit is that?
The men cracked up. Dalton sighed.
You don't know the Earth Ward like I do. You're right. I don't. Well, it's nice to meet who I'm going to be skull-fucking. You've made your choice, said Hammer. I have. And you will answer for killing James.
Hammer smirked as he extended his hands off to the side. The three men growled. Their clothing fell off, and they transformed into muscle-bound werewolves. Dalton had never seen a werewolf before, much less how they morphed, but he sensed their outsider energy. It was also easy to detect their relative strength and speed, and he was superior in that regard. Still, it was 1 against 3, assuming Hammer stayed put. The fact he did not transform indicated he probably thought the werewolves would be enough. The first attacker rushed forward and used the circular desk as a launching pad. When it was almost on Dalton, he sidestepped it and batted it to the side with his shield. He rushed over and light-stunned it. The werewolf growled and tried to get back up. Dalton used a medium stun. It got up and swiped at Dalton. Dalton blocked it with his shield and then used a heavy stun. The werewolf crumpled. Dalton spun back in time to shield bash the second one that came flying over the desk. The third one ran around and slammed Dalton into the wall. It unleashed a flurry of blows. Dalton took some hits before performing an uppercut with the top of his shield. He tossed his stun baton to his shield hand, then used his RSG. The werewolf stopped moving. Dalton used the wall to stand while moving the stun baton back to his right hand. The stomach blows had breached some of the areas between his armored pads, and blood spattered on the ground. The second werewolf charged forward and jumped off the side wall opposite Dalton. He focused and hit its upper right arm with the top of his shield, then followed through and used the rest of the shield to launch the attacker over him. It slammed into the wall. Dalton rushed over and stunned it. Hammer clapped. Impressive. Really? You kicked the shit out of them. Not many could do that. Dalton took a moment to catch his breath. His stomach burned. Hammer sighed. I hope they could take care of this little mess, but as expected, when you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. Hammer grew in size and bulk. He was a werebear, yet another outsider Dalton had never seen or interacted with before. Hammer was slow, but much more powerful, maybe even more than Dalton himself. Finally, a challenge. Hammer lumbered over and swiped his massive, clawed bear paw at Dalton. Dalton raised his shield and blocked it, but got knocked back against the wall. Taking more of those strikes was not an option, and the hallway was a bad place to be. When Hammer tried to stomp him, Dalton rolled out of the way to Hammer's side. He used his stun baton to hit Hammer's left leg. Hammer laughed. I'm a fucking werebear. Your stuns don't do shit to me. He lunged at Dalton, who scooted back. Hammer kicked him, sending him sliding. Dalton winced. Although the kick hit an armored pad, he had a sharp pain in his side, and blood spurted into his mouth. Now he was at the end of the hallway. Although he would have liked to take the fight outside, it would potentially expose Brad and the others. Dalton struggled to stand. Once up, he placed his shield out while using his arm to stabilize his abdomen. Hammer growled. You must be an alien or something, because you're not anything I've ever sensed before. Evolved human, said Dalton. Evolved. Right, said Hammer. He charged forward. Dalton blocked the next hit and used it as an opportunity to slide past Hammer. A quick burst later, and Dalton stood in front of the circular hub that served as a four-way junction. The stunned werewolves added to the difficulty in the hallway, and he chose to fight in the hub. Hammer, being essentially immune to stun, presented a new challenge, not one Dalton had expected to face. Hammer snarled as he whirled around and dashed forward, hitting Dalton's shield and sending him over the circular desk. Dalton ripped Mike's monitor out and threw it at Hammer. He swatted it away, then broke through the desk and slammed into Dalton. Dalton went flying to the other side. He needed a plan, and fast. When Hammer approached within grabbing range, Dalton jumped up and used his shield's top scraper to hit Hammer under the chin. Then he sidekicked him in the stomach. Hammer slid back and wiped the blood off his face. "Just stop this and leave," said Dalton, grimacing. Hammer laughed. "Why? Because you're losing? You don't need to do this. The hell I don't," said Hammer. He rushed forward. Dalton sighed and changed his stun baton into a vibrating short blade. Although he did not want to use lethal force, Hammer would not stop until he was down. Dalton burst forward through his pain and slid between Hammer's legs. Halfway through, he used his shield to lock himself in place between Hammer's legs, then jabbed upward into his groin. Dalton retracted his shield, crawled out, and kicked Hammer in the back. Hammer growled as he crumpled to the ground and grabbed his groin. Dalton stood and approached him. "Don't make me do this. Transform back and stay down. Never!" Dalton gritted his teeth. This was not an unfamiliar situation to him. He did not want to kill Hammer, but he could not let him keep on being a threat. "I could kill you," he said. "Then do it, you pussy, because if you don't, I'm going to hunt you down," said Hammer. He struggled to stand with the aid of the desk. Dalton frowned. Hammer's regeneration was fast, and the fact he was about to stand showcased that. Dalton sighed. He kneeled and sliced off Hammer's left foot. Hammer cried out and transformed back as he fell to the ground. He bent over and gripped his wound. A white substance formed around the stump. After a moment, he passed out. "Mike," said Dalton. Mike and the others rushed out. "I need a first aid kit. Although Hammer will probably heal, he's unconscious, and I need something to cover the wound." "Under the desk," said Mike, pointing. Dalton retrieved the kit and applied a pad, and then some tape. "Damn," said Brad, surveying the scene. "You are badass." Dalton stood and morphed into his official outfit. He coughed and spit blood. Sadly, Hammer and his friends didn't back down. "This could have been much worse." Brad nodded. "Yeah, but Hammer is a legend in Orbit Industries. What's going to happen to him and his friends?"
Earthward will deal with them. They have mobilized a response team and are en route,"
said Evot. "What she said," said Dalton, holding his side.
"I need to attend to you,"
said Evot. Dalton sighed. "Later."
"Okay."
"Were you able to check on James?" asked Mike. Dalton looked down. "I no longer sense him." Mike placed a hand on his forehead. "We'll wait here until the response team comes. Once they have a handle on the situation, we can leave when Jake arrives," said Dalton. He looked at Mike. "I'm sorry about James." Mike rushed around the desk and kicked Hammer in the back. "You fucking asshole!" Dalton grabbed Mike and held him back. Come on, he's down. Hammer will get what's due to him. He better!" Although Dalton had won, he felt nauseous. Eating a big burger before a fight was not something he wanted to ever do again. Hammer was maimed, and Dalton knew he would have had to kill him if he somehow healed up enough to continue fighting. Dalton had fought aliens where losing a limb did not mean the battle ended. That was where a majority of his kills came from. Pain was no stranger to him, but the hits and kicks Hammer dealt left their mark. Dalton realized that one of his ribs was broken. That would explain the pain. Thankfully, his supercells would attend to that, but he would need to rest. He was in no shape to fight any more anything at the moment. Hopefully, the response team arrived sooner rather than later. Dalton stood outside the safe house as the Earth Ward response team loaded James's corpse into a truck. They took about an hour to get there, and it was close to 8:00 p.m., which was when Jake would arrive. James's death ate at Dalton. It angered him that there was nothing he could have done to stop it. Mike was in shambles, and Dalton understood that Mike and James had been friends for quite a while. Mike had to be held back as he wanted to exact revenge on the unconscious Hammer and the werewolves. Dalton knew that feeling well and shared in the rage at a senseless death. Mark had retaliated, and for that, he would now be dealing with the Earth Ward. The secret prisons and research facility would be raided, and they would most likely take him in. Dalton wondered if every case would be this high stakes. Perhaps he should have waited on visiting Mark until Brad was safely away. Then again, Hammer might still have come. From what Brad mentioned, Hammer was infamous in the non-human world for catching other non-humans for humans. He would not be doing that anymore. As it turned out, the Earth Ward had a bounty on him, so Dalton had inadvertently helped them. One of the response team members said he thought he would never see the day Hammer was taken down. Evot had a lot of questions, and she wanted to help. There was not much she could do against a rampaging werebear and some werewolves. Hammer would have smashed her like the Monitor. Nonetheless, she had attended to Dalton, and he did feel somewhat better. She possessed a nanobot swarm around her servbots that vibrated, and they had a central component that, if damaged, would not easily be repaired. One precise hit, and the servbot would be lost. He could not rely on having something as advanced as the Torvada around to fix it. It was better to be safe than sorry, and although she said she understood, he suspected it bothered her. 20 minutes later, Jake arrived in his ship and rushed over. Dalton raised a hand as he approached. "Glad you could make it." Jake studied the Earth Ward response team. "Wow, you really got into it. I listened in on the response team's communications. You took down Hammer." "Well, it was no easy fight. He hit like a truck." "Yeah, that's why they call him Hammer. He literally hammers people into the ground." Dalton sighed. "I asked him to leave, but he didn't even consider it." Jake shook his head. "That's not his style. He has a reputation to uphold. He can enjoy what's left of it wherever the Earth Ward places him." Jake chuckled. "Yeah, they maintain a dimensional prison, so there's little chance he gets out from there. He's been on the Earth Ward's radar for a long time." Dalton nodded. Jake looked over at Brad and Evot. "I see you made a new friend, Brad Washington. He can talk to technology." "Whoa, that's cool," said Jake. "Lord Vigon and Lord Noskov updated me on the way out here. You really went to Mark Soldan's house and told him to leave Brad alone?" Dalton smiled. "I did. That's pretty bold, but I'm not surprised you did. I mean, that guy was already known as an asshole. He had been linked to Hammer and the Blood Pact, and now you have evidence of it." Dalton gestured at James. "Yeah, but the cost was high." Jake studied James briefly as the response team slammed the back doors on their van. "I don't envy those who work in the safe houses. They get good pay and benefits and security, but with people like Mark and Hammer, the workers can become targets, unfortunately so. I thought there might be some retaliation, but I didn't expect they would be so brazen as to attack a safe house." Jake nodded. "Yeah, well, now the Earth Ward is going to make an example out of what happens when you do that. Both Hammer and Mark are going away for a long time. Orbit Industries is about to get hit all over the place. I expect they'll be shutting down soon." Jake's point made sense. The Earth Ward needed to respond hard on this. Otherwise, it would be fair game on all other safe houses. Dalton did not like that the attempt occurred on his first solo case. From what he had gathered, very few would have survived Hammer and his gang. Brad would have been tortured and killed, or, even worse, sent to a prison island. Mike would also have died. Dalton did not intend to make a splash in the non-human world, but he suspected that Hammer's takedown would put him on many people's radar. The dimensional prison intrigued Dalton. There were 2 rift doors on the planet, similar to the one he had tested his Torvada touch on in the Torvada. One was maintained by the ancient vampires at Lord Noskov's base, and the other by the Alacrin Nation, an outsider group, but both were usable by all Earth Ward members. It seemed they found a place to put a prison in another dimension, which made sense. He intended to visit one to see how it worked. "I guess they're going to beef this place up now," said Jake. "Between what happened tonight in the trailer park, it's going to cause ripples. The Faith Militia will strike back." Dalton nodded. "Probably. And it's obvious that 2 guards aren't enough for this area. The response team took an hour to get here, so maybe the safe house needs better defensive structures." "Yeah, like a big turret," said Jake, imitating shooting a stationary machine gun. Dalton chuckled. "That'd work." Brad and Evot joined them. Dalton introduced Jake to Brad. "I hear you can talk to technology," said Jake, shaking Brad's hand. "That's what I heard too," said Brad. They laughed. "I'm surprised you lasted as long as you did out here as a wildborn," said Jake. Brad sighed. "I am too. But I'm going to give this Earth Ward thing a go." Jake nodded. "They'll probably require you to do classes at the Wildhaven Institute. I thought that was for how to interact with the human world." Jake grinned. It is. But the Earth Ward also incorporated some classes for those new to the organization. Dalton motioned at Brad. I'm still going to them as well. Then I guess I don't need to worry about mercs hitting me there, said Brad. Most likely not, said Dalton. He slapped Jake on the back. I think we're ready to go. Jake nodded and took off toward his ship. Well, I guess here's to a new beginning. A rough one, but still, said Brad. Dalton nodded. Hopefully your next case is a little safer. They followed Jake. Dalton was sure Brad would adapt to Lord Noskov's base quickly. It was one of the safest places on the planet. Not only did it harbor two of the planet's strongest non-humans, Dalton was based there for the time being. It also housed a large portion of Lord Noskov's clan on top of automated defenses and was built inside a mountain. Dalton liked interacting with Brad. His high-charged personality was different than most of those he had interacted with up to this point, but it only illustrated the diversity this Earth offered.
Chapter 11. Dalton yawned as he slid his legs off his bed. The familiar room he had come to call home for the last month greeted him, and he was glad to be back at Lord Noskov's base. The previous day had been rough, and although Dalton had healed, there was still some soreness. He cracked his neck by rolling his head from side to side, and even that hurt some. Evot had set his ribs, so his supercells had something to work with. While they worked fast, broken bones took a while to fully heal. He recalled the previous night. Jake had gotten everyone back to the base, and Brad seemed visibly relieved to be someplace he could sleep without having to fear for his life. Dalton had thought Brad might be scared of the ancient vampires, but when you had mercs and Hammer hunting you, perhaps not. Jake and Brad hit it off, and it seemed they enjoyed similar music styles. Dalton had never heard of most of the bands they talked about. Evot had flown around the neighboring forest and mountainside in crow form, while her cat form stalked the base. She liked organic interaction, whether it was human or not. He did not sense the serve-bots on him, so she must still be out and about. Dalton got up and did his morning routine. There was a debriefing meeting later, and he had set up his internal alarm to give him some time to get cleaned up and grab some breakfast. The cafeteria visit had become part of his morning ritual, along with watching Earthward news from across the world. It gave him some insight as to what was happening and the troubles they faced. Thankfully, one case had been solved, and he wondered if it would show up on the news. After getting in a good breakfast, he headed to the meeting room. Laughter echoed from inside. That was not what he expected after such a rough case. Lord Vigon, Lord Noskov, Mikhail, Jake, Robert, and Brad were already seated, and the source of their amusement became obvious as Dalton approached. Evot, in cat form, danced on her hind legs in the middle of the table. Her front paws swatted at the air in rhythm with some music she projected. Everyone focused on Dalton as he took his seat. He smiled and raised his hands. Please don't let me interrupt whatever this is.
I was dancing for entertainment,
said Evot. She dropped down, and the music stopped. It's okay. She merged back into Dalton's arm. Man, that is some freaky shit, said Brad. The merge thing, not the dancing. Dalton smirked. I get it. Now that I'm here, I guess the debriefing can start, unless you want more cat dancing. Lord Vigon gestured at him. While it was amusing, we can begin. We all know what happened on your first outing, and we're impressed. Not only did you resolve what caused the blackouts, you brought Brad along to work for the Earth Ward. I'm willing to give it a shot, said Brad. That's all we can ask, said Lord Vigon, nodding at him. He faced Dalton. You also exposed Orbit Industries, and now we have hard proof. The Earth Ward is moving on those islands, and they will most likely all be secure in the coming week. Mark is also in custody. Dalton sighed. Yeah, but we also had someone die. I wish I could say that is uncommon, but powerful groups are everywhere, said Lord Vigon. We've already reached out to James's family, and they will be compensated for life.
I'm glad to hear that. Brad frowned. Mark sending Hammer is no surprise. I'm sure he will be out of prison in no time. Lord Noskov's eyes narrowed. Not quite. He's going away to our dimensional prison. Same as Hammer and his friends. Jake mentioned that. Any chance I'll get to see it? Lord Noskov grinned, baring his fangs. You work for the Earthward, and you have access if you want it. Awesome. I can take you sometime, said Jake. I'll hold you to that, said Brad, slapping hands with him. Jake and Brad had formed a bond. Although Dalton observed parts of it forming last night on the trip back, it seemed to have become stronger. One reason might be that they were closer in age. Lord Vigon cleared his throat and pointed at Dalton. You also exposed the Blood Pact. It's always good to get more information about them, and thanks to the data you retrieved, we're also hitting their sights. What will happen to the Faith Militia I interacted with? Asked Dalton. Several of them are wanted. However, you gave them a second chance, and we'll honor that. If they break it, then they are up for retrieval. Fair enough, said Dalton. One of the Slayers was my friend. But I didn't know he was a Slayer, said Brad. How ironic is that? He would have gutted me on the spot if he knew what I was. Lord Vigon sighed. Such is the way for most Wildborn, I suspect. Yeah, said Brad, grimacing. Dalton wrinkled his brow. Speaking of those at the trailer park, I wanted to ask you about Valerie Simmons. Mikhail straightened. You should have brought her in. Dalton shook his head. She was at death's door when I found her. I understand why she killed Zeke, the Faith Militia leader. He slaughtered her sister and her niece. I don't think going to prison would have helped her, and I don't really know her past. Then she's the last of her kind. There were only 2 left, said Mikhail. He raised a hand, palm out, toward Dalton. When I said bring her in, I didn't mean for prison. I meant to protect her. Dalton drew his head back. She said the ancient vampires had a kill order on her. Mikhail laughed. We never did. But we did suspect her in several assassinations. Why would she think you wanted to kill her? Lord Noskov raised a finger. The ancient vampire reputation is built on power. She probably suspected that if we were looking into her, it was for assassination. That's how assassins think. Dalton nodded. Makes sense. Well, then she's confused. She's scared to death of you all. Well, to be fair, we did hunt her hard during the ill-fated registration era of the Earth Ward, said Lord Vigon. I'm sure that contributed to it. Lord Vigon shrugged. Probably. I'm sure she's back in hiding now. I would guess so, said Dalton. Nonetheless, you did all that with Orbit Industries, Mark Solden, the Faith Militia, Blood Pact, Hammer, Brad, and Valerie on your first case. I'm excited to see what happens next, said Lord Vigon. Yeah, but still, someone died, said Dalton, grimacing. I'd like to review the Earth Ward case selection process and how they determine priority. You'll have to go to headquarters for that, said Mikhail. Dalton looked around. Anyone up for a flight today? We're staying in today due to a visit from Everin, said Jake. I bet he just wanted to check on how you're doing. Really? He's coming here. Brad squinted and pointed at Jake. The Everin? Jake laughed. Yep. Damn, count me in for that, said Brad. Lord Noskov smiled. Yes, it is the Everin. And as usual, we have some confidential things to discuss with him. He gestured at Dalton. You're invited to join those discussions, of course. Outside of that, everyone is free to talk to him if he has time. Dalton rubbed his chin. Dr. Snowden and Emily coming too? Yep, and V as well, said Jake. Great. I'd like to see them all, said Dalton. Lord Vigon tapped at his table console. All right, let's dive into some details on what was discovered, thanks to Brad and Evot digging around. Dalton eased back into his chair. He enjoyed being around everyone at the table. Everin and the gang coming made Dalton's day seem brighter. James' death still aided him, It was senseless, and James had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The solo case had been more challenging than Dalton expected, and it would do him some good to visit with his former team. Dalton stopped by McHale's living quarters. He seemed to be in good spirits from the meeting earlier in the day, but Dalton still sensed something was off. Although he usually avoided prying into other people's business, his inspector side was curious, and he considered McHale a friend. McHale had an unresolved issue of some type. Lord Noskov gave his opinion on the matter, but it seemed that was only part of McHale's troubles. Dalton wanted to make sure he was not the cause of any problem. He knocked on McHale's door. "Come in," said McHale. Dalton pushed the door open. McHale sat in a comfortable chair with his armor off, not something Dalton saw often. "Have a seat," said McHale. "I'm just relaxing until Everin and the others come." Dalton nodded and sat in a chair perpendicular to McHale. "Everything all right?" asked McHale. "You tell me." McHale sighed. "I can't hide anything from you and your cosmic senses. Don't worry. My issue isn't related to you. Sorta." Dalton's eyes narrowed. "Whatever it is, if I can help, let me know. I appreciate that," said McHale. "However, this is related to a recent trip I took." "The one where you visited Blake Brown? Your master, I'm guessing?" McHale's face scrunched. "Yeah. How'd you know?" "I watched the video feed from that trip," said Dalton. "Everin records everything, usually." "Well, you're right about that. I did get to see Blake, although it was about 20 years in the future after some event." Dalton chuckled. "Most likely to avoid timeline integrity problems. Otherwise, Everin would have taken you at the same time we're in now." McHale nodded. "That's how it was explained to me, too. Nonetheless, Blake's starting a new clan." Dalton rubbed his chin. "And he's doing that without his oldest disciple." "Yeah, I'm glad he has someone he recently turned, Sarah Olson, who's a great person. But I'm here in the past and on Earth. Perhaps when 2032 rolls around, you can go out." "That's only 20 years or so from now." McHale shrugged. "I can't leave Lord Noskov like that. And Blake wants me to support Lord Noskov as much as possible. Which I will, of course." Dalton understood McHale's plight. He was essentially trapped, and to learn that his master planned to start up a clan must have been maddening. Although it was still a future event, McHale possessed the knowledge now. He had served under Blake for decades, and Blake had saved McHale from certain death before he turned. "I wish there was something I could do to help," said Dalton. McHale grimaced. "It's all right. When we did the Blooded mission, it reminded me of working with Blake. With a little less cursing and killing. Well, a lot less. I just need to bottle this and stop worrying, but I feel like things are moving on without me." "I hear you," said Dalton. "If it's any consolation, I'll be here for a long time. I hope, anyway. Anytime you need a partner for something, reach out to me." "I appreciate that," said McHale. "You have a lot on your plate already." Dalton studied him. "If Blake gets a rift door, you'll be able to visit him any time, right?" McHale tilted his head. "Huh, I guess so. Would Everin allow that? He's pretty picky about the two here." "It's actually one of the items on Blake's list to acquire. And that list was reviewed by Everin, so it sounds like it'll probably happen," said Dalton. "Unfortunately, you'll need to wait until 2032 or later until Blake gets it. Lord Noskov and Lord Vigon wanted a way to visit without requiring Everin every time." I didn't know about that," said McHale, standing. Dalton stood and smiled. "Now you do." McHale laughed and bear-hugged him. "The future is bright." "Yes, it is." Dalton wondered why Everin or Lord Noskov had not told McHale, and maybe Dalton was not supposed to say anything. It did not hurt to have McHale know, and, if anything, it gave him hope. Dalton did not fully understand the bond between a disciple and a master, but it seemed to be strong. He had no doubt that Blake missed McHale, especially after their recent reunion. Dalton would not be surprised if the ancient vampires left Earth at some point to get their own planet, Although he only recently met them, he figured they would turn out to be his strongest ally, and to lose them would be a blow. That was a potential future event, though. A lot of time remained until then. It had been 2 hours since Dalton talked with Mikhail. After that, Dalton had met with Lord Noskov and Lord Vigon about Earthward issues. Whenever Everin stopped by, they had a prioritized list of items to discuss. Topics ranged from the rift door in the ancient vampire's possession to new policies the Earthward considered. Dalton found the discussion interesting and gave his opinion on some of them. As he stood outside on the platform that extended out from the mountainside, he closed his eyes and focused. Although the Toravata was cloaked, he could still sense it, an attribute of being chosen by it. Everyone else stood next to him, and the excited mood mixed with smells from the grill Robert attended filled the air. Evot was in her humanoid form, and Dalton suspected she wanted to interact with the others as much as he did.
"The Toravata is near," said Dalton.
Brad looked around.
"I don't see or sense anything."
Dalton pointed and slowly moved his finger toward the landing platform. Lord Vigon's eyes narrowed.
"I never do. Your connection to the Toravata means it can never hide from you. I hope it would never need to."
A moment later, the Toravata landed and decloaked. Dalton smiled as Everin and the gang disembarked. It seemed like only yesterday that he had traveled with them. Nostalgia washed over Dalton. Everin had on his light gray suit with dark gray armored pads. Dr. Snowden had a hollow shell over his survival suit. He appeared with his brown vest, pants, and white shirt. Emily had on a similar hollow shell and appeared with jeans, comfortable shoes, and a vest. V was in projected mode and appeared as a young male similar to Jake. The groups met halfway. Dalton's forearm shook with Everin, and their eyes slightly glowed.
"Whoa,"
said Brad. Dalton grinned when Emily rushed over and hugged him. It was good to see her again. He shook hands with Dr. Snowden and then pulled him in for a back slap. V high-fived Dalton, then walked over to Brad. He slowly raised a hand.
"You're an AI too."
"Analysis. You are correct."
"Awesome," said Brad as he high-fived V. V high-fived Evot.
"It is good to see you again."
And you, of course,
said Evot. Everin studied Brad. "You are a wildborn and can talk to technology."
Yeah. How'd you know?"
"Like Dalton, I can see exotic energy signatures." Brad nodded.
Cool.
Everin gestured at Dalton. "How was your first case?"
He scrutinized Everin. "You knew about it, but didn't look it up." He crooked a thumb at Lord Vigon, similar to him. "He knows the future, but avoided looking at my cases."
"There is a good reason for that, as you are aware," said Everin. "The less we know, the less chance there is that something is quantified."
"I understand,"
said Dalton. Dr. Snowden grinned. "Besides, it's more fun this way. I loved reading your after-case report."
"I figured you might."
Emily swatted Dalton's arm. "I read it too." "You took on a werebear?"
He laughed. "Yeah, but it wasn't like I went looking for trouble."
"Maybe not. But you handled it."
Dalton nodded. "I'm still a bit sore, but I'm healing." He poked Emily's arm. "Not as efficient as your nanobots, though."
She smiled. Lord Vigon pointed at the grill.
"As always, we have food and drinks."
He glanced at Everin.
"Afterward, and as usual, there are some things to talk about. Dalton will be joining us."
"As expected," said Everin. Dr. Snowden slapped Dalton on the back. "I want to hear more about your case." He looked at Brad. "And from your perspective, too." "I think we all would," said Emily. "But first, burger time." She and Jake took off to the grill. The group laughed as they walked over.
"Analysis. I detected your connection attempt,"
said V, looking at Brad. Brad smiled. "I was just checking."
"It is quite okay."
Music played over the outside speakers.
join me,
said Evot, looking at V. She morphed into her cat form, then got on her hind legs and danced around while pawing at the air. V transformed his hollow shell into an orange cat and joined her. Emily laughed. "V, what have you been teaching her?"
"This is not my doing,"
said V as his tail swished about.
Brad showed me cats dancing. It elicits a positive response from humans,
said Evot. "I love it," said Emily. Dr. Snowden smiled at Dalton. "You've had quite a handful to deal with, but I never would have figured dancing cats were involved." Dalton laughed. "I wouldn't have either. But here we are." "I am sure you have a lot to tell," said Everin. "We look forward to hearing about it." A feeling of peace washed over Dalton. With so many friends around, good food and drinks, a warm temperature, and a festive atmosphere, it was what he dreamed this Earth would be like. There would probably be hard cases in his future, but he was ready. He would take it one day at a time. The end. This has been Transition, the Inspector Dalton Files Prequel, written by Adair Hart, narrated by Michael Wolfe. Copyright 2020 by Adair Hart. Production copyright by Adair Hart.